Chapter 791. You want to convert me. You're dreaming. Yi Xian's body cracked, and wisps of death aura wrapped around him. However, his bloody eyes stared viciously at the two sages of the West. What a ferocious demon. The shock on Jane's face faded and turned into a gloomy one. He looked at Yi Xian with great anger. You destroyed all your cultivation and forced out all your innumerable Buddha spiritual energy. You're really ruthless, Xuandi said gloomily. There was no trace of peace on his face. Ha ha ha. Looking at the gloomy faces of the two sages of the West, Yi Xian couldn't help but laugh wildly. Just as the two had said, he was being converted by the golden lotus Buddha fire in the black and white chessboard, and his will was gradually being obliterated. Even the tribulation transcender transformation and the heaven-destroying halberd couldn't help him survive this great tribulation. However, at the last moment, Yi Xian had a flash of inspiration and suddenly thought of a solution. Since the golden lotus Buddha fire originated from the innumerable Buddha spiritual energy and gushed out from his limbs and bones, as long as he dispersed all the innumerable Buddha spiritual energy in his body, he could escape from this great tribulation. Dispersing the innumerable Buddha spiritual energy was equivalent to destroying his cultivation and returning him to the state of being seriously injured and dying. This was a great tribulation for Yi Xian, but Yi Xian only had one way to escape this disaster. Fortunately, Yi Xian made the right bet. When he dispersed his cultivation and forced out the innumerable Buddha spiritual energy, the golden lotus Buddha fire dissipated, and he finally escaped from the black and white chessboard. Puff! Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of golden light, which made Yi Xian gasp violently. However, the two sages of the West didn't see the shock in Yi Xian's eyes. Crack! It was as if the heavens and earth were exploding. Yi Xian's mind trembled as he felt as if something within his body was shattering. An extremely mysterious flow of air was actually growing within his body, and it was circulating through his meridians at an extremely fast speed. The shackles had been broken. Yi Xian's eyes were glazed over as he screamed inwardly. The mysterious power in his body was terrifying to the extreme. It was frantically repairing his shattered 8 extraordinary meridians, but it didn't produce any strange phenomena. The first tribulation of the heavenly Tao. Was this the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao? Yi Xian roared in his heart as he came to a sudden realization. The golden lotus Buddha fire that was born from the 10,000 Buddha spiritual energy was his first tribulation of the heavenly Tao. He had actually accidentally dispersed his cultivation and passed through the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao. Without destruction, there can be no construction. Only by shedding a cocoon and transforming into a butterfly can one be reborn. Yi Xian roared in his heart. He clenched his fists tightly as an extremely terrifying power quietly grew in his body. However, he did his best not to let it leak out because the two saints of the West were right in front of him. He could not let them discover his abnormality, and he could not let them know that he was undergoing a terrifying transformation at this moment. Stubborn, you deserve to die. Bang! With a flick of his sleeve, Jane sent Yi Xian flying. His face was filled with rage, and Yi Xian fell heavily to the ground. Blood gushed out of his mouth and he looked extremely miserable. Senior brother, don't be angry. Xuandi hurriedly tried to dissuade him. Although he also wanted to kill Yi Xian was of great use to them. They couldn't really kill him. This boy is so vicious that he would rather destroy his own cultivation than join us Buddhists. How should we deal with him? Jane said angrily. Obviously, the two saints of the West wanted to convert Yi Xian into a Buddhist, but they failed at the last minute. How could Jane not be resentful? Now that their purpose had been revealed and Yi Xian knew about it, Yi Xian was already on guard. This made it even more difficult for the two saints of the West. Senior brother, don't be impatient. Xuandi whispered and pulled Jane to the other side. They were discussing something in a low voice. Yi Xian was lying on the ground in the distance, covered in blood, as if he had fallen into a coma. Without destruction, there can be no construction. After destruction, there can be construction. The tribulation of the heavenly way, the sage-to-be is invincible. Yi Xian seemed to be heavily injured and on the verge of death. His deathly white bones were exposed, and his entire body was dripping with blood. However, earth-shattering changes were occurring within his body, especially the undying true spirit in his sea of consciousness, which had actually swelled up by a circle, becoming even darker as it crazily rotated within his sea of consciousness. Power, powerful power. This power did not exist in the three realms, but it had appeared in Yi Xian's body. Not only was it secretly healing his injuries, but it was also adding to his body an imperishable true spirit. Powerful, very powerful, very powerful. Yi Xian's heart was filled with excitement. His eyes, which were originally filled with despair, flickered with excitement. This was because not only was his crippled cultivation crazily recovering, his own cultivation was also increasing at an extremely terrifying speed. Invincible sage-to-be. These four simple words explained Yi Xian's current state. After passing the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao, he had a qualitative improvement. This improvement was so terrifying that it was impossible to describe it to others. If Yi Xian had been at the peak of the sage-to-be and had defeated the two demon emperors with serious injuries, then Yi Xian, who had passed the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao, could easily suppress the two demon emperors when he faced them again. This was the difference between them. However, this was not what excited Yi Xian the most. What excited Yi Xian the most was that a black power had appeared in his body. This power was mysterious and profound. It even faintly emitted a holy light. It actually contained a trace of a saint's aura. Of course, this trace of a saint's aura was extremely weak. It was so weak that even Yi Xian himself could not detect it. However, it truly existed in Yi Xian's body. Fierce, violent, domineering. All kinds of domineering words could not describe how Yi Xian felt about this power. However, Yi Xian had a deep understanding of one thing. This extremely weak saint power was extremely powerful and terrifying. It could not be compared to the power produced by merits and holiness. This was because this was his law and Tao. It was also the most direct manifestation of the law of proving Tao through strength. Breeding, nurturing, growing. This power was hidden in the deepest part of Yi Xian's body. In the future, it would definitely bring Yi Xian unimaginable growth. Phew! Yi Xian exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He slowly opened his eyes and silently hid this power. Even though he had passed the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao, he was still no match for the two sages of the West. He still needed to continue enduring. His body was broken and his bones were exposed. Yi Xian deliberately did not repair the surface of his body. He appeared to be in an extremely weak state. He even dispersed the power in his body, leaving only a trace of terrifying saint power hidden in his body. Only by deceiving the sages and deceiving them could he not let the two sages of the West notice his abnormality. This was also what Yi Xian had to do. At this moment, Yi Xian sat cross-legged. He looked at the two sages of the West and saw them talking under the Bodhi tree. However, the two sages were so powerful that they had already sealed the void. Yi Xian did not know what they were talking about. However, even though he could not hear their conversation, Yi Xian knew that the two sages of the West would never let him go. As for what he would face next, he could only prepare in advance. Chapter 792. Under the Bodhi tree, the two sages of the West talked for a long time until the light of Buddha that sealed off the void dissipated. The two sages of the West also walked out from under the Bodhi tree. Yi Xian. The two sages of the West strolled forward until they came in front of Yi Xian. Their faces were no longer peaceful, and even the light of Buddha that was blooming around them was no longer there. They were looking at Yi Xian with an unfathomable gaze. "You two old bald donkeys, what other tricks do you have?" Yi Xian cursed agitatedly, but his eyes were extremely calm. He was paying attention to the two sages of the West's movements. "Yi Xian, We don't want to make things difficult for you. If you had just joined us, we would not have done this. Jain shook his head and sighed. The great way of heaven and earth is the origin of all Buddhas. What's wrong with joining us? You can be free and unfettered. From now on, you are the junior brother of the two sages of the West. In the future, even if you want to settle your scores with Nuwa and Yuanshi, how can we just sit by and watch? Xuanti said softly. Hearing the words of the two sages of the West, Yi Xian's heart suddenly skipped a beat. An extremely bad feeling grew in his heart, as if he was about to encounter an unprecedented catastrophe. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Previously, the two sages of the West had been hypocritical and kind, but now their faces were solemn and extremely serious. They no longer looked as pretentious as before. Obviously, they must have decided on something. Otherwise, they would never have shown such an attitude. They no longer pretended and revealed their true nature. At this moment, the two sages of the West were showing their true temperament. There was no so-called benevolence and peace, no so-called light of Buddha shining, and no preaching their Buddhist ideals. Run. This simple word explained Yi Xian's state. He suddenly turned into a ray of light and fled to the outside world. His expression was extremely serious because he was extremely sensitive to danger. The two sages of the West were definitely going to use some kind of terrifying means on him. Everyone below the sage level is a non-entity. Junior brother, where can you escape to? Xuanti said calmly. With a wave of his hand, he sealed the world and an invisible force detained Yi Xian. Qi! 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 The void fluctuated and ripples appeared. Streaks of golden light were born in the void. Jia Yin put his palms together and his expression was solemn. He was chanting a mysterious scripture in a low voice. Even the sound of chanting could be heard in the void. Come! The two saints of the West sat cross-legged under the Bodhi tree. Yi Xian was like a rootless duckweed that was imprisoned by the two of them. He directly sat cross-legged between the two of them, and the sound of chanting in the sky became even louder. Ah! Yi Xian sages of the West. Were his eyes. Yi Xian was, his eyes were. And he were sages of the two sages of the West. Were his chants. Yi was were of the sages of the time of the were of the of them. Forcibly convert and change the spirit. These simple words explained Yi Xian's current situation. Since the Golden Lotus Buddha fire could not convert Yi Xian into a Buddhist, it was impossible for Yi Xian to willingly join the Western Buddhism. The two sages of the West had no choice but to resort to forceful means. When the Buddhist chants entered one's ears, the sages unleashed their power. This was soul conversion. Not only could the Buddhist chants change one's nature, but it could also turn one into a devout Buddhist. This method was unique to the two sages of the West. It was an extremely terrifying method of the sages. The two sages of the West did not want to use this method unless they had no other choice. This method had a huge drawback. This method was extremely vicious. The success rate of forcibly changing one's nature was less than 30%. The failure rate was as high as 70%, and the victim's soul would scatter and die. Yes, the victim's soul would scatter and die. After a long discussion, the two sages of the West could only choose this method. If they could not convert Yi Xian into a Buddhist, he might as well die. This was the two sages of the West's last resort. Rumble. The light of Buddha fell from the sky. The chanting of the two sages of the West became more solemn and loud. Yi Xian's face was distorted to the extreme, as if his head was about to explode. Ah! Yi Xian let out a shrill roar and looked up to the sky. He felt that his immortal spiritual body was about to explode, and his own will was quickly being obliterated. It was as if he was being converted by the Golden Lotus Buddha fire again. However, this time, even if he dispersed all his cultivation, he could not escape this catastrophe. This was because the two sages of the West were attacking him personally. The sages' Buddhist chants could obliterate all things, not to mention that they were joining forces to convert him. Yi Xian gritted his teeth and endured the torment. He could not lose himself and turn into a Buddha. Otherwise, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. What a fierce madman! Kundi suddenly opened his eyes. When he saw Yi Xian using his will to resist the conversion of the two sages, he said in a gloomy voice. Junior brother, don't be distracted. Convert him quickly, Jane said solemnly. This also made Kundi close his eyes again. The Buddhist chants in his mouth became even more terrifying. Under the Bodhi tree. The two sages of the West were chanting, and the light of Buddha was floating in the void. Yi Xian was completely submerged in the bright light of Buddha. The evil qi that overflowed from his body was quickly obliterated. No, no, in the bright light of Buddha, Yi Xian said weakly. He was prostrating himself on the ground, and his body was involuntarily convulsing. A faint light of Buddha was quietly growing around him. For 49 days, the sound of Buddha reverberated throughout the world. The two sages of the West did not stop. They had been trying their best to convert Yi Xian. The entire Yuan mountain was covered by the light of Buddha. From afar, it looked like a dazzling golden star. Senior brother, 49 years have passed. This lad should have been converted by now, Kundi said softly. No, Yi Xian is no ordinary person. Even though the sound of soul expiation is a saint's skill, you and I still have to be on the safe side. We have to wait for 81 years to ensure that nothing goes wrong, Jane said. Great. Kundi nodded slightly. Rumble. The light of Buddha increased once more, and the sound of Buddha was even louder. In order to ensure that Yi Xian was converted, the two sages of the West did not dare to slack off. They once again used the saint's skill to convert Yi Xian. Time passed like water, and after 81 years, the Buddhist light that filled the sky finally dissipated, and the chanting of sutras in the void came to an abrupt end. Is he alive or dead? Under the Bodhi tree, Jane opened his eyes and looked at Yi Xian. His expression was extremely solemn. Because the sound of soul expiation was too vicious, the success rate was only 30%. If he could not convert Yi Xian would definitely die. He's still breathing. He's not dead, Kundi said in a timely manner. There was great excitement in his voice. Since he's not dead, why is he still unconscious? Jane was delighted at first, but then his expression turned solemn. Even though the sound of soul expiation was vicious, it only changed a person's mind. It did not cause any harm to the caster. Chapter 793. Logically speaking, since Yi Xian had not died, he should be surrounded by the light of Buddha and should not have fainted. However, on the contrary, Yi Xian was unconscious, and the light of Buddha around him was faintly discernible. This was extremely strange. Could it be that he still failed? Jane frowned and strode toward Yi Xian, wanting to check on Yi Xian's condition. However, before he could reach Yi Xian, what happened next stunned the two sages of the West. Greetings, senior brothers. Under the Bodhi tree, Yi Xian opened his eyes. A light of Buddha flickered in his eyes, and a Buddhist smile appeared on his face. A light of Buddha rose behind him, illuminating him with boundless Buddha nature. He put his palms together and bowed to the two sages of the West. Rumble. Heaven and earth shook, and the light of Buddha illuminated the sky. Above the dome, golden lotuses bloomed in the void. Wisps of light of Buddha grew in all directions, and the sound of chanting came from the void. Clang, clang, clang. The 81 bells of heaven and earth rang out as the silhouette of a giant Buddha rose up behind Yi Xian. This Buddha's silhouette was exactly the same as Yi Xian's. At this moment, it was sitting cross-legged behind Yi Xian, spanning the heavens and the earth. Sound of Buddha, golden lotuses falling from the sky. Looking at Yi Xian's strange phenomenon, Kundi trembled and spoke, his face overflowing with ecstasy. He looked at Yi Xian as if he was looking at a peerless treasure. Jane greets junior brother. Jane greets junior brother. Suddenly, the two sages of the West walked up to Yi Xian with smiles on their faces. They put their palms together and bowed to Yi Xian with the same benevolent smile on their faces. Woo! The fierce wind blew, and the light of Buddha sprinkled down. The black clothes on Yi Xian's body disappeared, and under the shining light of Buddha, a white monk robe appeared on his body. His hair hung loosely behind his head, as if he had turned into an eminent monk. Thank you, senior brothers, for enlightening me and freeing me from my demonic heart. From now on, my heart is devoted to Buddha, and I have no other thoughts. Yi Xian put his palms together and chanted Buddha's name in a low voice. The Buddha's light lingered around his body, giving off a warm and peaceful feeling. Good, good, good. Although junior apprentice brother had once entered the demonic path, it is rare for him to return from the wrong path. Senior apprentice brothers are very pleased. Jia Yin smiled and nodded. Zhuanti smiled and said, Today, junior brother, you have returned from the wrong path and joined the Buddhism sect. Since you can give up your life, why don't you call yourself Qingming? Peering into the heavens above, looking down at the 9 underworlds below, roaming the 3 realms of heaven and earth with the Buddha's heart encompassing the heaven and earth. The meaning of this name was extremely profound. It was also the Dharma name that the 2 sages of the West had long prepared for Yi Xian. Qingming. Yi Xian murmured. He then nodded slightly and looked at the 2 sages of the West. This name is very good. Thank you, senior apprentice brothers, for bestowing this name upon me. Junior apprentice brother, you had previously entered the demonic path and suffered great injuries. Although your ferocious nature has been worn away by the Buddhism sect today, your injuries are still serious. Senior apprentice brothers will help you heal them. Jia Yin and Xianghe spoke. At this moment, the 2 sages of the West were surrounded by holy light. Wisps of Buddha's nature circled around them. They placed their palms directly between Yi Xian's eyebrows. An extremely vast amount of holy power continuously poured into Yi Xian's glabella. Rumble. The holy light was blazing, and the Buddha's light was boundless. The 2 sages worked together, and Yi Xian's injuries were quickly healed. The Buddha's light around him became even more intense. Buzz. After dozens of breaths, the 2 sages finally stopped. Yi Xian had also recovered to his peak state. At this moment, he was sitting cross-legged under the Bodhi tree with his eyes closed. A grand and solemn Buddha's voice came from his body. Junior apprentice brother, you should meditate and adjust your breath first. When you wake up from your cultivation, go to the back of the mountain to find us. Senior apprentice brothers have something to say to you. After saying this, Jia Yin gave Zhuanti a look. The 2 sages turned into light and disappeared. Back of the mountain. The 2 sages of the West sat on 2 large golden lotus platforms. Wisps of holy light wrapped around them and sealed off this part of the world to ensure that their conversation would not be overheard. Senior apprentice brother, do you think Yi Xian has been converted by us? Zhuanti's smile was no longer there. There was a worried look in his eyes as he asked Jia Yin. The soul-expiating Buddha's voice is no small matter. If you and I work together to convert him for 81 years, even if he is a Vajra stone, he will be converted successfully. Jia Yin smiled and continued, just now, you and I seemed to be healing his injuries, but we were also checking his actual situation. This child's body is full of Buddhist power, and his indestructible true spirit has turned golden. He has indeed been successfully converted by you and I, and this is absolutely true. But Yi Xian is a cunning person, and he possesses all sorts of mysterious techniques. If he uses some kind of great technique to save you and me, I'm afraid junior brother. Zhuanti wanted to say something but hesitated. However, the worry in his words was extremely obvious. Junior apprentice brother, you worry too much. Don't think too highly of him. You and I are both sages. How can he convert us? Moreover, the soul-expiating Buddha's voice is a sage skill that we created. Even if Yi Xian has great abilities, he will not be able to resolve the soul-expiating Buddha's voice. Jie Yin said with a smile, full of confidence. He knew very well how powerful the soul-expiating Buddha's voice was. Moreover, this time they worked together. How could Yi Xian not be converted? Senior apprentice brother, you're right. I think I worry too much. Zhuanti nodded, but there was still a touch of worry in his eyes and a trace of uneasiness in his heart. Zhuanti was a meticulous person with an extraordinary intuition. He always felt that there was something wrong with Yi Xian, but he could not tell what was wrong. Zhuanti could only suppress this worry. Perhaps he was too sensitive. Yi Xian had already been converted by them. How could he be converted by two sages? Under the Bodhi tree. Yi Xian sat cross-legged, surrounded by the light of Buddha. He chanted the voice of Buddha in a low voice, giving people the feeling that he was an old monk in meditation. From time to time, there was an auspicious qi around him, as if he was really an eminent monk. Buzz! Suddenly, a black light quietly cut through the sky and strangely appeared in front of Yi Xian. As the black light gradually disappeared, an illusory figure appeared. Soul-expiating Buddha's voice. These two old bald donkeys are so ruthless. The black illusory figure said coldly. He strolled in front of Yi Xian, constantly scrutinizing Yi Xian. Wisps of black flowing light twined around him, and a faint killing intent bloomed. To kill or not to kill? The black illusory figure murmured. His appearance was completely covered by the black curtain, making it impossible to see what he looked like. The aura around him gave people a sense of obscurity. Terrifying, extremely terrifying. The black illusory figure had entered the Taoist rite of the two sages of the West without them noticing. This ability alone was unimaginable. My good disciple, do you think I should kill you or not? The black illusory figure's voice was cold and deep. The aura around him was constantly in disorder, proving that he was not calm. Obviously, he was in a state of extreme hesitation. You good for nothing. I gave you the Hong Meng immortal vapor, but you didn't use it to become a sage. You always wanted to get out of my control. If you had become a sage earlier, why would I take the risk to come to the Taoist rite of these two bald donkeys today? Yuan Ling. He was actually Yuan Ling. He was also Yi Xian's first real appearance in front of Yi Xian since he entered the Earth God realm. At this moment, he raised his hand as if he wanted to kill Yi Xian on the spot. No, I can't kill him. He hasn't become a sage yet. If I kill him, won't all my efforts be in vain? Yuan Ling said hatefully to himself. He finally lowered his raised hand. Chapter 794. Under the Bodhi tree. Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged with the warmth of spring wind and rain. Behind him, Buddhist light lingered. He had a peaceful smile on his face and was as still as an old monk in meditation. Yuan Ling was mysterious and profound. He was surrounded by black fog and his aura was obscure. If one didn't see him with their own eyes, they would see him standing in front of Yi Xian. It was impossible to sense his existence. The void was destroyed and killing intent flickered. His origin spirit had never hesitated like this before, because Yi Xian was too important to him. It was so important that if Yi Xian really died at this moment, everything would start over. The Immortal scripture is a forbidden book from beyond the heavens. The creator of this nerve once said that it is immortal and indestructible, and transcends the heavens. Could it be that the soul-cleansing Buddhist voice of two mere baldies can really convert him? Yuan Ling muttered to herself as she suddenly looked at Yi Xian. The black mist around her was extremely chaotic. Disciple? Yuan Ling whispered. He stared at Yi Xian through the black fog, hoping to see if Yi Xian was deceiving him. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was still sitting cross-legged like an old monk. It was as if he was really immersed in cultivation. No matter how Yuan Ling called him, he didn't respond at all. Could it be that he's really been enlightened? Yuan Ling frowned as she continuously paced in front of Yi Xian, hoping that her guess was wrong. All techniques return to one, limitless spiritual energy. Suddenly, Yuan Ling stopped in his tracks. The black fog around him evaporated and a black light grew from his fingertip. He pointed it at Yi Xian. The wind blew. It was a strange black wind that instantly enveloped Yi Xian. However, the Buddhist light around Yi Xian's body suddenly lit up, and a demonic roar sounded out from within his body. Damn it, he really has been converted. This scene made Yuan Ling roar in anger. At the same time, the two Western sages arrived. How dare you? Who trespasses here? Wang. Before the two saints of the West could attack Yuan Ling suddenly turned into a wisp of black smoke and disappeared. No matter how the two saints of the West used their supreme saint techniques, they could not find any trace of Yuan Ling. Who is he? Kundi cried out in shock. He quickly pinched his fingers and displayed the holy technique of heaven and earth, hoping to deduce the identity of the person. However, the result was unknown, which made him extremely solemn. Junior brother, do you still remember that Yuanshi Tianzuan almost killed Yi Xian? Yuanshi's great technique was neutralized by Yuanshi's black light. I'm afraid that the person who just appeared must be closely related to Yi Xian, Jia Yin said gloomily. Senior brother, things are turning stranger and stranger. Apart from us 6 saints, is there another existence in this world that is comparable to us? Kundi asked in horror. Pangu split open the heavens and Hung Jun imparted the Tao. But junior brother, have you never thought about what world it was before the creation of the heavens and earth? Where did great god Pangu come from? Where did Tao ancestor Hung Jun come from? Jia Yin said solemnly. Could this person be someone from beyond the chaos heavens? Kundi muttered in horror. He suddenly looked at Jia Yin, his eyes filled with panic. I don't know. Jia Yin shook his head and sighed. Although he was a saint, he did not know the secrets behind the creation of the heavens and earth, much less someone from beyond the chaos heavens. Let's not care about this person's background for now. However, we've already reached this step. This Yi Xian absolutely cannot be lost. Jia Yin said in a loud and clear voice. Amitabha. As the two saints of the West conversed, a compassionate Buddhist proclamation came out of Yi Xian's mouth. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes as he looked at the two saints of the West with a peaceful smile. Junior brother, you are awake. Jia Yin's solemn expression was replaced by a peaceful one as he asked Yi Xian with concern. If not for your help, I wouldn't have been able to recover my cultivation level so quickly. Yi Xian pressed his palms together and bowed at the two saints of the West. He exuded a Buddha-like aura from beginning to end. Junior brother, you are the 7th heavenly ordained saint. You are also an important figure who brought glory to our Buddhist lineage. You are naturally blessed, said Kundi with a smile. Junior brother, tell me, have you obtained the Hong Meng immortal vapor? Jia Yin sat cross-legged beside Yi Xian and directly asked the question that Nu wanted to know the most. Senior brothers, I have lent the Hong Meng immortal vapor to Ancestor Mingi during the battle with the ancient demon court. However, Ancestor Mingi has led the Azura tribe back to the Nether Blood Sea. At the moment, the Hong Meng immortal vapor is not in your hands. Yi Xian pressed his palms together and said softly. Good. Jia Yin was overjoyed when he heard Yi Xian's answer. He knew that Yi Xian was indeed the 7th heavenly ordained saint. Although the Hong Meng immortal vapor was in Ancestor Mingi's hands, it was not a difficult problem. Junior brother, you are now at the peak of the sage-to-be. Even Dong Huang Tai and Emperor Jun are no match for you. Although you have removed your ferocity and joined our Buddhist sect, you have not lost any of your cultivation. As long as you get the Hong Meng immortal vapor back, you will definitely become the 7th saint. Kundi smiled. Amitabha. Yi Xian chanted the name of Buddha in a low voice. Ancestor Mingi was born from the Nether Blood Sea and can be said to be immortal. Now that the Hongmeng immortal vapor is in his hands, I am afraid that he... Yi Xian wanted to say something but hesitated. He didn't continue, but his meaning was already extremely obvious. The two Western saints looked at each other with a peaceful smile on their faces. Junior brother, you don't have to worry. Even though the Nether River was born from the Netherworld Blood Sea, and it's even said that the Nether River will never die as long as the Blood Sea doesn't dry up, the two of us wouldn't dare to take the primordial violet energy for ourselves. Jia Yin looked at Kundi and said, Junior brother, it seems that you need to go to the Nether Blood Sea and get the Hongmeng immortal vapor back. Senior brother, don't worry. I will bring the Hongmeng immortal vapor back in half a month at most. With a wave of his sleeve, the wonderful Seven Treasures tree appeared. When Juandi took a step forward, his entire body quietly disappeared from under the Bodhi tree. It was obvious that he had gone to the Netherworld Blood Sea to ask for the primordial violet chi for Yi Xian. At this moment, the people who wanted Yi Xian to become a sage the most were not the people of the celestial court or his so-called subordinates, but the two Western sages at this moment. Why did the two Western sages take the risk to convert Yi Xian? After all, Yi Xian was the seventh destined sage. As long as they converted Yi Xian into a Buddhist before he became a sage, after Yi Xian became a sage, there would be 3 sages in Western Buddhism. They would be able to fight against the 3 pure ones and not be at a disadvantage. This was the real intention of the 2 Western sages. Now that they knew where the Hongmeng immortal vapor was, the 2 Western sages would not delay. Kundi even went to the Nether Blood Sea personally. As long as he could get the Hongmeng immortal vapor back, he would be able to help Yi Xian become the 7th destined sage. Junior brother, this 1000 Buddha scripture is the lifelong cultivation method of Kundi and I. It includes all the Dharma and supernatural powers of Western Buddhism. It also contains many unique saint arts of Kundi and I. You should study it first and learn it when you become a saint in the future. Chapter 795. Out of nowhere, a golden scripture appeared in Jia Yin's hand, and he handed it to Yi Xian with great care. Obviously, this 10,000 Buddha scripture was the life's work of the 2 sages of the West. From this, it could be seen that after the 2 sages of the West converted Yi Xian, they had already regarded Yi Xian as one of their own. They were even more determined to nurture Yi Xian at all costs. Only by making Yi Xian the 7th heaven-ordained saint would Western Buddhism have 3 great sages and no longer be under the 3 pure ones. Thank you, senior brother Jia Yin. I will definitely study it well and not let you down. Yi Xian held the 10,000 Buddha's scripture in his hands and bowed to Jia Yin with his palms together. Junior brother, this Bodhi tree is the spiritual root of 10,000 Buddhas. Sitting under the tree will greatly benefit you in comprehending the 10,000 Buddha scripture. I still have some trivial matters to attend to, so I will take my leave first. If you have anything you don't understand about the 10,000 Buddha scripture, you can come to the back of the mountain to ask me, Jia Yin said with a pleasant expression. Senior brother, please go ahead. I can comprehend this scripture on my own. Yi Xian nodded with a smile. Looking at Yi Xian's solemn expression, Jia Yin felt comforted and no longer doubted Yi Xian. He rode a cloud and returned to the back of the mountain, leaving Yi Xian alone under the Bodhi tree. Whoosh whoosh, a cool breeze blew, causing the branches and leaves of the Bodhi tree to sway slightly. Yi Xian opened the 10,000 Buddha scripture in his hand and began to read it calmly. A Bodhi tree, a Buddha-like person, accompanied by the cool breeze, and with the Buddhist scripture in his hand, Yi Xian seemed to have really become an eminent monk. He buried his head in the 10,000 Buddha scripture. Not only was he comprehending the philosophy of Buddhism, but he was also studying the supreme supernatural powers of Buddhism. The sun rose and the moon set, and the stars moved. Even though this world was created by the 2 sages of the West, there was also the alternation of the sun and the moon. There were even stars twinkling in the sky, illuminating this world with starlight and without a speck of dust. Under the Bodhi tree, Yi Xian slowly closed the 10,000 Buddha Sutra. The light of Buddha around him did not diminish in the slightest, but the peaceful smile on his face slowly disappeared, and gradually turned into a grim expression. What a soul-crossing Buddhist mantra! It almost consigned me to eternal damnation. Yi Xian whispered coldly. The expression on his face was ferocious and gloomy. Under the illumination of the Buddha's light, it gave off an extremely strange feeling. Yuan Ling has also appeared. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes slightly, and the Buddhist light in his eyes had already dissipated. What rose with it was an extremely terrifying and fierce look. He did not look like he had been enlightened at all. As expected, Yuan Ling was terrifying to the extreme. Even though he had entered the dojo of these two baldies, he hadn't been discovered by them. It seemed that I had to be very careful. Yi Xian's expression was extremely solemn. From the moment the two sages of the West used the soul-crossing Buddhist mantra on him and even believed that he had been enlightened to Yuan Ling's arrival, Yi Xian had actually seen everything. In fact, the two sages of the West had made a huge mistake, and this mistake had also given Yi Xian a chance to escape. When Yi Xian had passed the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao, his body had produced that weak sacred power. It was also at the final moment when Yi Xian was about to be enlightened that this sacred power had saved him. This sacred power was extremely terrifying. It was completely different from the sacred power produced by virtue and virtue. Not only did it offset the two sages of the West's enlightenment, but it also concealed Yi Xian from the inside out. Even the two sages of the West did not notice anything strange. Yi Xian had relied on the sacred power in his body to accomplish this. This made Yi Xian very excited. For the time being, the two sages of the West were no longer a threat to him. The two sages of the West had also miscalculated this place. If Yi Xian had just stepped into this place and the two sages had used the soul-crossing Buddhist mantra on him, Yi Xian would definitely have been enlightened. However, the two sages of the West wanted to play it safe and let Yi Xian enter the myriad Buddha spiritual pool to be enlightened by the Golden Lotus Buddha fire. Coincidentally, this also allowed Yi Xian to pass the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao. As if it was predestined, Yi Xian, who had passed the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao, underwent an earth-shattering change. The weak sacred power in his body had helped him resist the soul-crossing Buddhist mantra. However, what Yi Xian did not expect was that Yuan Ling would appear in front of him. This made Yi Xian even more shocked. He almost wanted to tear off his disguise and talk to Yuan Ling. However, in the end, Yi Xian held himself back. If he really tore off his disguise, not only would everything he had done before be for naught, it would alert the two sages of the West. It would also make Yuan Ling more cautious. It would be better for him to continue hiding. This was the most beneficial thing for him. Yuan Ling is too mysterious. He wants to steal my body and control the forbidden chapter of the immortal scripture. He also wants to control the heaven-destroying halberd. There must be too many secrets that I don't know about. Yi Xian murmured in a heavy voice. Now that I've fallen into the hands of the two sages of the West, Yuan Ling must be more anxious than I am. He definitely won't sit back and do nothing. This way, I can take advantage of the situation. If I can force him to fight the two sages of the West, it will only be beneficial to me. Yi Xian murmured in his sleep. The corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile, and a glint of light flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian sat cross-legged under the Bodhi tree, deep in thought. He was constantly planning what he might encounter. He was also thinking about how to lure Yuan Ling to appear again and use the two sages of the West to test Yuan Ling. Yuan Ling's appearance today has already alerted the enemy. For the time being, he shouldn't dare to appear again. Although the two sages of the West have let down their guard against me, I still have to be careful. For the time being, I'll comprehend the supernatural powers in the 10,000 Buddha scripture once. This can also be considered as collecting some interest from these two monks. Yi Xian murmured to himself. A look of determination flashed across his eyes. It had to be said that the 10,000 Buddha scripture was indeed the most precious treasure in the world. It included all kinds of great techniques of the Buddhist lineage. However, what really caught Yi Xian's attention was the sage's technique of the two sages of the West. The sage's technique couldn't be imparted to outsiders. Whether it was the so-called Daluo or sage-to-be, it was impossible for them to see one or two in their lifetime. Today, Yi Xian obtained the 10,000 Buddha scripture. Naturally, he had to cherish this great opportunity. Although it wouldn't allow his cultivation to improve again, mastering the sage's technique would bring him an unimaginable improvement. Moreover, Yi Xian was now a bird in a cage. If he really showed any abnormality, the guide would be the first to know. This was definitely not the result that Yi Xian wanted to see. Comprehending the 10,000 Buddha scripture in his hand would be of great benefit to Yi Xian. Moreover, Yi Xian didn't want to escape from the two sages of the West for the time being because Yuan Ling was more anxious than him. He had to think carefully about how to lure Yuan Ling out again and let Yuan Ling fight with the two sages of the West. This was his real goal. Yi Xian knew that he was playing with fire. However, there was a saying that went, "Wealth comes from danger." If he didn't take the risk, how could Yi Xian find out who Yuan Ling's real identity was? Under the Bodhi tree. The spring breeze brought gentle rain and the Buddha's light was auspicious. Yi Xian's gloomy face gradually disappeared and turned into a benevolent look again. He unfolded the 10,000 Buddha scripture and carefully comprehended it. There was nothing unusual about him at all. Chapter 796. 3,000 Sands, Buddhist Kingdom in the Palm. Rumble. The void turned illusory as strange phenomena appeared one after another. Yellow sand filled the sky, stirring up the wind and clouds in the world. The chanting of sutras from the Buddhist kingdom came from all directions. Phantoms of Buddhas appeared in all directions, and an illusory world appeared. Junior brother, this is the Buddhist kingdom in the palm. It's my own divine power. Not only does it have the ability to overturn heaven and earth, but it also has the supreme power to trap and destroy one's soul. Do you understand? Jain's 5 fingers were like mountains, and a bright holy light surrounded his palm. He was demonstrating his divine power to Yi Xian and carefully teaching Yi Xian. A world in a grain of sand, a Bodhi in a leaf. Senior brother's divine power is amazing. I admire you very much. Yi Xian, who was wearing a white monk robe, put his palms together and bowed. His words were extremely sincere. Junior brother, although this is a sage's divine power, you can also use it with your current cultivation. It's just that you haven't become a sage and can't use the divine power of heaven and earth. However, against a sage-to-be, this Buddhist kingdom in the palm will make you invincible, Jain said proudly. Thank you for your guidance, senior brother. Yi Xian bowed again, sincerely thanking Jain. The 10,000 Buddha scripture was indeed the most precious treasure of Buddhism. Even though Yi Xian had disguised himself in front of Jain, these few days of comprehending the 10,000 Buddha scripture had given Yi Xian a lot of inspiration. Sages were indeed sages. Not to mention the Dharma in the 10,000 Buddha scripture, just the many divine powers in it were an eye-opener for Yi Xian. Buddhist kingdom in the palm, 3,000 sands, Vajra glazed body, Sumera heaven and earth, Buddha's heart lotus, 3,000 arts of suppressing hell. There were dozens of divine powers that dazzled Yi Xian. He admired the two sages of the West even more. Although they were enemies, Yi Xian admired the two sages of the West's cultivation and knowledge. Sages were indeed extraordinary. Yi Xian had to admit that his cultivation had improved significantly under Jain's guidance. Senior brother. Suddenly, a cloud appeared on the horizon. Daoist Juanti returned. When he appeared in front of Yi Xian and Jiayin, his expression was gloomy. Seeing Kundi's gloomy appearance, Jain frowned and said, Junior brother, did something go wrong on this trip to the Nether Blood Sea? I'm ashamed that I couldn't bring the Hongmeng Immortal Qi back. Please forgive me. Zhuan-Ti put his palms together and said apologetically. Jiayin was stunned, and he said, since we saints have arrived, how could Mingi dare not hand over the primordial violet energy? Senior brother, you don't know. I went to the Nether Blood Sea to ask for the Hongmeng Immortal Chi, but Mingi resisted desperately and was unwilling to hand it over. In the end, he exploded his body and merged with the Nether Blood Sea. Unless you destroy the entire Nether Blood Sea, you will attract the attention of the three pure ones, and I can only return empty-handed. How should I deal with this matter? Zhuan Ti said with a gloomy face. Ancestor Mingi was at the peak of the sage-to-be. The Nether Blood Sea was the most difficult part of him to deal with. As long as the Nether Blood Sea was not destroyed, Ancestor Mingi would not die. Even a saint would have a headache. It was not that the saints could not kill the Nether River Patriarch, but in order to kill the Nether River Patriarch, they had to destroy the Nether Blood Sea first. However, the Nether Blood Sea was vast and endless, and there was the Azura clan in it. Destroying the Nether Blood Sea was equivalent to destroying an entire clan, which was no small matter for the saints. Humph, Mingi, how dare he fight against the two saints of the West for the Hongmeng Immortal Chi? It seems that we have to find a reason to destroy the Nether Blood Sea. Jane whispered coldly, with a cold killing intent in his eyes. The two saints of the West were full of killing intent. At this moment, they did not have any Buddhist nature. Everything they did was to help Yi Xian become a saint. Only in this way could the Western religious sect prosper and not be subordinate to the three pure ones. Anyone who dared to block their way would be killed by the two saints of the West without any mercy. Senior brothers, don't be angry. Why don't you let me go to the Nether Blood Sea personally and use Buddhism to influence him? After all, you lent him the Hongmeng Immortal Chi. As the saying goes, karma engenders each other. I think Mingi may be willing to return the Hongmeng Immortal Chi to me. Yi Xian put his palms together. No. Jane frowned. Jane frowned and said, you have just joined the Western religious sect. If you come out now, you will attract the killing intent of Nuwa and others. Moreover, Mingi wants to become a saint. I am afraid that even if you go to the Nether Blood Sea personally, he will not return the Hongmeng Immortal Chi to you. Yes, we can deal with Mingi. But if you really come out, Nuwa and Yuanshi will never let you go. If you are killed by a saint, how can we be at ease? Zhuanti echoed. Looking at the two saints of the West rejecting him, Yi Xian's expression did not change, but he sneered secretly. He knew that the two saints of the West did not want to let him go, and they were afraid that other saints would know that he had joined the Buddhist sect. Senior brothers, don't worry. Since I have joined the Buddhist sect, I will change my appearance. This will save me a lot of trouble. As Yi Xian spoke, the light of Buddha rose around him. When the light of Buddha dissipated, his original appearance had disappeared. He had turned into a young monk, completely different from his previous appearance. Looking at Yi Xian's changed appearance and the light of Buddha around him, the two saints of the West's eyes lit up. They were moved. I am Yi Xian. Greetings, senior brothers. From now on, there is no more Yi Xian in the world. Yi Xian put his palms together and bowed to the two saints of the West, showing his Buddha nature. Good, good, good. Jane smiled and said, good, 3 times in a row. Zhuanti opened his Dharma eye of heaven and earth, but he could not see Yi Xian's real body. A touch of surprise flashed across his eyes. Junior brother Qing Ming, have you cultivated the Dharma form of innumerable Buddhas? Zhuanti asked in surprise. Senior brother, you flatter me. I have indeed cultivated the Dharma form of innumerable Buddhas. Yi Xian nodded and smiled. Hiss. Zhuanti sucked in a breath of cold air, but his eyes were burning as he looked at Yi Xian. The Dharma form of innumerable Buddhas was his Dharma access. Not only could it change one's appearance, but it could also hide one's breath and transform everything in the world. There were too many transformations in the 3 realms, with the most famous being the Taoists' 36 heavenly astral transformations and 72 earthen fiend transformations. These were high-tier Taoist arts that the Lord of Primordial Beginning had passed down. In order to not lose to the three pure ones, Xuanti painstakingly created the Dharma form of innumerable Buddhas. This Dharma form of innumerable Buddhas was extremely powerful. It was even more difficult to cultivate than the Taoist sect's 36 transformations and the Disha 72 transformations. Many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the Western sect could not cultivate this Dharma form because it was too harsh. However, although the Dharma form of innumerable Buddhas was extremely difficult to cultivate, it was also extremely terrifying. Even the saints could not accurately perceive the other's real body. Unless the saints investigated it personally, no one could expose the Dharma form of innumerable Buddhas. Chapter 797. However, Xuanti did not expect Yi Xian to have cultivated his Dharma form of 10,000 Buddhas in just a few days. This made Xuanti extremely excited and surprised. Good, good, good. Junior brother Qing Ming is indeed talented. In the future, our Western religious sect will definitely flourish. Even the three pure ones will not be afraid. Xuanti laughed out loud. Since junior brother Qing Ming has cultivated the Dharma form of 10,000 Buddhas, we can be at ease when we come out. However, the Hong Meng immortal Qi is of great importance. We must not attract the attention of others. Junior brother, you don't have to rush to the Nether Blood Sea. You should first stay in the lower realm Spirited Mountain to appease the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas. This can also stabilize the hearts of our Western religious sect. Jane pondered for a long time and finally planned a route for Yi Xian to come out of the world. He also had to arrange a suitable identity for Yi Xian. Otherwise, the appearance of a sage-to-be in the Western religious sect would definitely attract the attention of the outside world. Rumble. Holy light shone between heaven and earth. A golden decree appeared out of nowhere. Jane wrote something on the golden decree continuously. It was not until 10 breaths later that he finished writing. Junior brother, take my decree to the lower realm Spirited Mountain. From now on, you will be Buddha Qing Ming of Spirited Mountain. All the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas will listen to your orders. This way, you will be able to do things in the outside world. Jane smiled and handed the decree to Yi Xian. Junior brother, before you leave, I want to entrust you with a few things. You must remember and never neglect them. Xuanti kept reminding Yi Xian. The first thing was that the battle between the two celestial court 10,000 years ago had pierced through the sky. Hundreds of millions of miles of sky could not be healed. From time to time, meteorites and galaxies would pour into the three realms, causing a boundless catastrophe to all living things. None of the four major states were spared. The great orthodoxies opened the seal formation, but it could only alleviate the disaster. It could not really solve the problem. When Yi Xian went to Spirited Mountain, the first thing he had to do was to pacify the billions of Buddhists in the Aparagodania continent. He also had to use his great divine ability to strengthen the seal enchantment, so that the billions of Buddhists would not be affected by the calamity. The second thing was that Yi Xian's identity had been confirmed. He was transformed from the chaotic golden lotus and had always been by the side of the two sages of the West. He was also the Bodhisattva of the Western religious sect. Today, when the catastrophe of the world began, he was born in human form and became the junior brother of the two sages of the West. His Buddhist name was Qing Ming. The third thing was that after Yi Xian arrived at Spirited Mountain, he would become the first Buddha of Spirited Mountain. All the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas would have to listen to his orders. Yi Xian would also rise from Spirited Mountain. At that time, he would find an excuse to go to the Nether Blood Sea and take back the Hong Meng immortal Qi. Following the two sages of the West's earnest advice, Yi Xian nodded slowly to show that he had remembered it. This also made the two sages of the West feel slightly relieved. Then, the sage-to-be sent Yi Xian away from Spirited Mountain. Junior brother, when you take back the Hong Meng immortal Qi, you will definitely be able to comprehend the opportunity to become a saint. At that time, you and I will not be afraid of the three pure ones. The three realms will respect the Western religious sect, the two sages of the West said with a smile. Don't worry, senior brothers. I will definitely live up to your expectations. Yi Xian's light of Buddha shone brightly. He put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. Under the gaze of the two sages of the West, an auspicious cloud rose under Yi Xian's feet and he directly walked into the distant world. Looking at Yi Xian who had already left Spirited Mountain, the smile on Xuandi's face gradually disappeared. Then, it turned into a touch of seriousness. He looked at the guide and said, "Senior brother, are you really not worried about Yi Xian leaving?" Ha! The guide smiled slightly and looked at Yi Xian's departing figure. He said, "Don't worry, junior brother. The soul exorcism Buddhist voice has succeeded. He is no longer Yi Xian, but our junior brother Qing Ming. Didn't you and I already decide that he will go to Spirited Mountain? Our Western religious sect has always been suppressed by the three pure ones. This time, Yi Xian has joined our Buddhist sect. We are only waiting for him to take back the Hong Meng immortal qi. When he enters the Saint Realm, it will also be the time for us to fight against the three pure ones," the guide said unpredictably. "I hope everything goes well." Xuandi sighed. He did not know why he always felt uneasy in his heart. However, he could not find the source of this uneasiness. This feeling made him extremely uncomfortable. After leaving Spirited Mountain and crossing the Sea of Bitterness, a golden Buddhist door appeared on the horizon. As long as one stepped through this golden Buddhist door, they would be in the boundless luminous starry sky. Buzz! Heaven and earth teleportation, so close yet so far. Yi Xian finally walked out of the Western paradise and appeared in the starry sky. Rumble! The sea of stars churned and large stars stood in great numbers. Yi Xian stood in the starry sky. The Buddhist light around him was resplendent and dazzling, but his expression became extremely gloomy. He came out. He really came out. Yi Xian had temporarily survived a life and death calamity. He even walked out of the Western Pure Land and was considered to have escaped the control of the two saints of the West. Whoosh! Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of turbid air. A loud explosion came from thousands of miles away in the starry sky. If Yi Xian escaped from the two saints of the West in the past, he would definitely hide in the earth immortal world and conceal his identity until he passed the three tribulations of the heavenly Tao. However, Yi Xian's thoughts were different now. He wanted to use the two saints of the West to force Yuan Ling out. If he could make the two saints of the West and Yuan Ling fight each other, this would be exactly what Yi Xian wanted. Moreover, Yi Xian now had the decree of the two saints of the West in his hands. The Spirited Mountain in the lower realm was completely under his command. This would also allow him to do things that were beneficial to him. Unfortunately, he had now turned into Buddha Qing Ming. He could not expose the truth that he was Yi Xian, nor could he return to the 33rd Celestial Court. This was something that he had no choice but to do. The world is like a chess game, and all living beings are chess pieces. Who is the chess piece and who is the chess player is still unknown. Yi Xian's lips curled into a sneer. The Buddhist light around him shone brightly. He turned into a stream of light and surged toward the Earth Immortal World. Earth Immortal World, a Paragodania continent. The world was dark, and the sun and moon did not shine. The stars in the sky could be seen through the cracked sky. From time to time, there were meteorites falling from the sky. There was also a vast river of stars pouring down. It gave people a feeling that the world was about to be destroyed. However, they were all blocked by a heaven-sealing formation and were annihilated in the sky. From time to time, bodhisattvas and arhats could be seen shuttling back and forth in the sky. They were constantly bringing spiritual stones and magic weapons to the heaven-sealing formation to prevent the broken sky from bringing another destructive disaster to the Aparagodania continent. Not only the Aparagodania continent, but the other three continents were also the same. Back then, the two celestial court activated the heaven and earth ultimate formation and broke through the heavens for hundreds of millions of miles. The extent of the impact was unimaginable. No one knew how many creatures died in this catastrophe. Even after 10,000 years, the vitality of the four continents had not recovered much. The sky was filled with yellow sand and billowing dust. Yi Xian was wearing a white monk's robe. A Buddhist light rose behind him. He stepped barefoot in the yellow sand with a smile on his face. Under the reflection of the stars in the sky, he looked sacred and majestic. He gave people a deep sense of reverence. Chapter 798. Yellow sand filled the sky as the Milky Way poured into heaven and earth. The entire Aparagodania continent looked beautiful, but in reality, it was a scene of misery. Countless living beings were in the depths of fire. The boundless sky was pierced through, and millions of miles of land had fallen. The battle between the two great celestial court had finally started a catastrophe of heaven and earth. The disasters and consequences it caused were unimaginable. The Aparagodania continent was the foundation of Buddhism in the West. It was said to have millions of Buddhists. Unfortunately, the once peaceful land of Buddhism was now in ruins. Only yellow sand covered the sky and earth. Every day, there were mortals buried in the yellow sand. Yi Xian walked forward with his bare feet. Along the way, he saw withered bones all over the ground. Some belonged to humans, some belonged to demons, and there were also many skeletons of demonic beasts. In the yellow sand that covered the sky, it was like purgatory on earth. The six desires were emotionless, and heaven and earth were heartless. Although Yi Xian had a merciful smile on his face, there was only indifference and emotionlessness in his eyes. Even if all living beings died tragically in the world due to the catastrophe of heaven and earth, and a large part of the reason was related to him, Yi Xian did not feel too much. The cycle of heaven and earth, the cycle of all living beings. From prosperity to decline, this was a necessary process. However, Yi Xian believed that he had sped up this process. As for the life and death of all living beings, it was also caused by their weakness. Weakness was the original sin. Yi Xian had always believed in this principle. Therefore, he had to make himself stronger. He did not want to be inferior to others. He had to truly stand above the 9 heavens and look down on all living beings. The stars in the sky twinkled, and the yellow sand danced wildly on the ground. Yi Xian faced the moonlight and walked through the yellow sand. He walked from night to day, and from day to night. He walked all the way to the west, and the Buddhist aura around him became more and more peaceful. He summoned clouds and rain, cast spells and bestowed medicine, expiated the souls of the dead, and mourned the living. As Yi Xian walked through the Aparagodania continent, he had to promote Buddhism wherever he went. He used Buddhism to save all living beings, and countless Buddhists knelt and kowtowed to him, chanting his great name. Of course, the so-called name was not Yi Xian, but his Buddhist name, Qing Ming. This was because Yi Xian knew that when he reappeared in the 3 realms, the name Yi Xian could no longer be used. He wanted to become Qing Ming, to mess up the world, and achieve his goal. Step by step. As for his promotion of the Dharma to save all living beings, it was just to build momentum for him. His good deeds. Spirit Mountain, Great Thunderclap Temple. Spiritual energy filled the sky, and the light of Buddha shone brightly. The Buddhist bell reverberated between heaven and earth, and the sound of chanting filled the sky. The Great Thunderclap Temple stood tall, and there were even phantoms of bodhisattvas and Buddhas looming in the void. Who are you? Halt! There were 2 novice monks guarding the entrance at the foot of Spirited Mountain. When Yi Xian appeared in the air, the 2 novice monks frowned and scolded him coldly. I am Qing Ming. I want to see Duobao Rulai. Yi Xian smiled kindly. The Buddhist light behind him was dazzling, causing the 2 novice monks to be stunned. Just the aura that Yi Xian emitted caused the 2 of them to be shocked. They knew that this person was definitely a supreme expert of the Buddhist sect and wasn't someone they could afford to offend. Please wait a moment. I will go and report this. The two little novice monks put away their negligence and hurriedly chanted a Buddhist name and were about to leave. However, before the two of them could go and report, a golden cloud suddenly rose from the Tempest Temple and slowly drifted towards the foot of Spirited Mountain. Amitabha. A Buddhist chant came from the golden cloud. Duobao Rulai was sitting cross-legged on the golden lotus. Behind him were Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. There were also 3,000 Buddhas and Bodhisattvas standing in all directions. At this moment, they all looked at Yi Xian. Greetings, Uncle Master Qing Ming. Duobao Rulai pressed his palms together as the golden lotus beneath him quietly dissipated. He slowly walked towards Yi Xian in the air, and when he arrived in front of Yi Xian, he even humbly bowed to Yi Xian. This scene caused the two novice monks to be stunned on the spot. They were unable to recover from their shock for a long time. Greetings, Buddha Qing Ming. The Bodhisattvas of the heavens, the various Buddhas, the 3,000 truths, the 18 arhats, and the various Buddhist sects all bowed to Yi Xian. The Buddhist chants from their mouths resounded through the heavens, and the Buddhist light that rippled through the heavens gave off a boundless feeling. Looking at this scene, Yi Xian smiled peacefully. However, there was a strange feeling in his heart. He did not expect that he would be in charge of the great thunderclap temple of Spirited Mountain, which he had a deep grudge with in the past. Every dog has its day. Yi Xian could not help but think that if Duobao Rulai knew that this Buddha Qing Ming in front of him was Yi Xian in the past, he wondered how he would feel. I already know that the saint has summoned me. Please stay in the great thunderclap temple. I will report everything to you slowly. Please, Uncle Master. Duobao Rulai was extremely humble. He was inviting Yi Xian. However, if one were to pay attention, they would notice that Duobao Rulai's eyes were wandering. He had been secretly peeking at Yi Xian. His eyes would flash with surprise from time to time. It was no wonder that Duobao Rulai looked like this. It was because the two sages of the West had sent an oral order. They said that their junior brothers had been born and would stay in the great thunderclap temple of Spirited Mountain. All the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain had to listen to Yi Xian's orders. Duobao Rulai naturally did not dare to disobey the saint's order. However, he had always been the Buddha of the West and had always been in charge of Spirited Mountain of the West. At this moment, Yi Xian's arrival naturally made him feel uncomfortable. After all, no one would be happy when their power was taken away. However, the saint's will could not be disobeyed. Duobao Rulai naturally did not dare to have any complaints. Moreover, Duobao Rulai was very curious about one thing. He had never heard of Qing Ming. Since when did the two sages of the West have such a junior brother? Of course, Duobao Rulai did not dare to ask about this. He only had doubts about Yi Xian's identity. He could only test Yi Xian in the future to see what relationship he had with the two sages of the West. Accompanied by Duobao Rulai and all the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain, Yi Xian passed through the mountain gate and walked towards the great thunderclap temple step by step. It was also at this moment that 81 bells were rung. This was also to gather everyone in Spirited Mountain to gather at the great thunderclap temple. The Great Thunderclap Temple. The flag of the Western sect was the orthodoxy established by the two sages of the West. Golden lotus platforms bloomed in the void, and golden mist rose from the spiritual pond. There were bodhisattvas sitting upright, arhats standing upright, and 8 division heavenly dragons floating in the void. Yi Xian wore a white monk robe and sat cross-legged on the golden lotus of the Buddha. Beside him were Duobao Rulai and Dipankara. Uncle Master Qing Ming, did you bring the decrees of the two sect masters? Duobao Rulai put his palms together and bowed to Yi Xian. Buzz! A beam of golden light spread out, and the saint's decree suddenly appeared. Golden Buddhist scriptures rippled in the great Layin temple, causing Duobao Rulai's expression to change slightly. He quickly knelt down and kowtowed to the decree. Chapter 799. Duo Bao Rulai was not the only one. When the decree of the two sages of the West appeared, the entire Great Thunderclap Temple was filled with chants of Buddhist names. All the bodhisattvas and Buddhas knelt down with pious looks on their faces. My Dharma name is Qing Ming. My two senior brothers, Zhu and Ti, asked me to temporarily guard the holy mountain in the west. I have to quell the disaster that the catastrophe of heaven and earth has brought to hundreds of millions of Buddhists. I will also die. Everyone present can carry forward the essence of Buddhism and truly save the world from this disaster. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the golden lotus of Buddha as a light of Buddha rose behind him. His vast and compassionate voice resounded throughout Spirited Mountain, prompting all the bodhisattvas and Buddhas to respond, chanting the merciful voice of Buddha. Martial uncle, this is the Book of Spirited Mountain. From Arhat Bodhisattva to Buddhas and Venerables, everything is recorded in the Book of Spirited Mountain. Please take a look. Duo Bao Rulai flipped his hand, and a golden book appeared. He respectfully handed it to Yi Xian to read. The Spirit Mountain of the West seemed peaceful, but the forces within were actually quite complicated. Duo Bao Rulai was only the ruler, but he was definitely not the existence with the strongest cultivation. At this moment, Yi Xian was constantly flipping through the Spirit Mountain book. After an hour, he finally finished reading the Spirit Mountain book. He now had a clear understanding of the situation of Spirit Mountain in the West. Duo Bao Rulai used to be a disciple of the Tongtian. Later, because of the investiture of the gods, he joined the two sages of the West and could be considered an in-name disciple of the two sages of the West. He also became the master of the Western Sacred Mountain and was in charge of all matters of the mountain. Ancient Buddha Dipankara was known as Taoist Dipankara in the past. Like Duo Bao Rulai, he had switched allegiance to the Western sect during the Great God Investiture Tribulation. However, Dipankara's cultivation level was extremely high, and he had just entered the ranks of sage to be. Apart from the two of them, some bodhisattvas, venerables, and arhats were also from the Taoist lineage in the past. Clearly, the Great God Conferment Tribulation was an opportunity for the Western sect to rise. In addition to these people, there were also 4 great Buddhas who were cultivating in the depths of Spirited Mountain. These 4 great Buddhas were sage-to-be figures and did not appear in the outside world all year round. Unless Spirited Mountain encountered a great disaster, these 4 great Buddhas would not appear in the outside world. Where are the 4 great Buddhas? Yi Xian looked around and didn't miss the 4 great Buddhas. This made him speak peacefully and look at Duo Bao Rulai. Martial uncle, the 4 great Buddhas have been in seclusion for many years, cultivating the Vajra Bodhi heart. They only want to peek into the saint realm, so they didn't come. Duo Bao Rulai smiled flatteringly, a strange look flashing in his eyes. Uncle Master Qing Ming, please don't be offended. Those who cultivate the Vajra Bodhi heart are emotionless. This is also the greatest foundation of Spirited Mountain. Moreover, the 4 great Buddhas are all sage-to-be. Naturally, they are not under the jurisdiction of Spirited Mountain. Dipankara recited the name of Buddha in a low voice. He was neither servile nor overbearing to Yi Xian from beginning to end. To be honest, Dipankara was detached from worldly affairs and was now a sage-to-be. If Yi Xian hadn't come with the decree of the two sages of the West, he wouldn't have come. His appearance here was to give face to the two sages of the West. As for Yi Xian, he didn't think much of him. Stepping into the sage-to-be was extraordinary. Except for the 6 great sages of the world, the sage-to-be could be regarded as the supreme figure. Such figures naturally had their own pride, even the Buddhists were no exception. Do you mean to say that once you become a sage-to-be, you can look down on Spirited Mountain's Buddhists? Yi Xian looked at Dipankara with a smile. His face was even more peaceful, and the Buddha's light around him gave people a feeling of bathing in the spring breeze. However, the bodhisattvas and Buddhas present were a little breathless. They looked at Yi Xian with a touch of surprise. Although Yi Xian seemed to be easygoing, there was a hidden needle in his words. How could the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas not be surprised? They didn't know why Yi Xian had offended Dipankara when he had just assumed command of Spirited Mountain. Stepping into the sage-to-be is extraordinary. As a Buddhist disciple, we must be kind. However, some of the Buddhist rules are no longer applicable to sage-to-be figures. Don't you know that, Buddha Qingming? Dipankara frowned and said in a low voice. From beginning to end, Dipankara didn't see Yi Xian's cultivation. In his mind, Yi Xian was at most a sage-to-be like him. If it weren't for the decree of the two sages of the West, he wouldn't have been so polite to Yi Xian. If Yi Xian was the master of Spirited Mountain, Dipankara naturally didn't want to oppose Yi Xian. However, Dipankara also heard from Yi Xian's words that the new master of Spirited Mountain seemed to rely on the support of the two sages of the West. He didn't care about the sage-to-be at all. Whether it was because he didn't want to be controlled by Yi Xian or because of his pride as a sage-to-be, Dipankara naturally couldn't lower his head to Yi Xian. Moreover, Dipankara had a high status in Spirited Mountain. Yi Xian was just a newcomer. If he lowered his head to Yi Xian, wouldn't it be a joke to others? At this moment, Duo Bao Rulai narrowed his eyes and took a few steps back without leaving a trace. The Bodhisattvas and Buddhas were also silent. At this moment, Dipankara and Yi Xian were at loggerheads. They didn't dare to get involved. After all, they couldn't afford to offend either of them. Greed, anger, and infatuation, resentment, and hatred. You, a monk, have only just entered the quasi-saint stage, yet you already have a demonic thought in your heart. How can you be worthy of becoming a member of my Buddha? Buddha Qingming, are you slandering me? Dipankara's expression changed. He looked at Yi Xian with an unfriendly gaze. Men, take Dipankara down and send him to Jiuyo Tower to repent for 30,000 years. Suddenly, Yi Xian said mercifully. This made Duo Bao Rulai and the Bodhisattvas and Buddha's expressions change drastically. They didn't expect Yi Xian to say such ignorant words. Dipankara was one of the Buddhas of the Western Sacred Mountain. He was more respected than Duo Bao Rulai. Moreover, Dipankara had just become a sage-to-be. Looking at the great Layin Temple of Sacred Mountain, who could take him down except for the four Buddhas who never appeared? Qingming, don't think that I'll bow down to you just because you have the support of two sect masters. Ancient Buddha Dipankara was enraged. His gaze towards Yi Xian became extremely unfriendly. An ancient bronze lamp appeared in his hand, and its green flame flickered in the air, faintly collapsing the space around it. Yi Xian didn't seem to see Dipankara's anger. Instead, he looked calmly at Duo Bao Rulai and the others. He said in a peaceful voice, Dipankara's evil roots are deep. Why don't you take him down? What? Duo Bao Rulai's face was gloomy. He smiled wryly and could only lower his head without saying a word. Obviously, he couldn't afford to offend Yi Xian, nor could he afford to offend Dipankara. Silence was the best solution. Qingming Buddha, you've just entered Sacred Mountain, but you want to use me to establish your power. I'm afraid you've made the wrong decision. I'll certainly report this to the two sect masters and ask them to give me justice. Ancient Buddha Dipankara was extremely furious. He could tell that Buddha Qingming wanted to use him to establish his might. If it wasn't for the fact that Buddha Qingming had a great relationship with the two Western saints, ancient Buddha Dipankara would have already attacked Yi Xian. Humph! Dipankara mounted a golden cloud and was about to float away with the ancient bronze lamp in his hand. Obviously, he was going to report Yi Xian to the two Western sages. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's deep and compassionate voice suddenly rang out before Dipankara could walk out of the great Layin temple. A Buddha's palm suddenly appeared above Dipankara's head. Evil creature. Chapter 800. The divine power of all Buddhas was like a mountain that could suppress the universe. Although the palm looked peaceful and heavy, it was filled with a supreme power that could suppress heaven and earth. How dare you? Dipankara's expression changed greatly. He had never thought that Yi Xian would attack him. He had no time to think about it, so he raised his palms to meet the attack. Bang! There was a loud explosion and the void was destroyed. The huge palm of Buddha's light that filled the sky slapped Dipankara to the ground and shattered half of his body. Blood, golden blood, could also become Buddha's blood. Golden Buddha's blood spilled all over the ground. Dipankara's shattered body kept twitching on the ground, and he fell into a daze. One strike, just one strike, Yi Xian's strike made Dipankara suffer an unimaginable calamity. This made all the bodhisattvas and Buddhas in the great Lain temple silent. Silence, silence, extreme silence. However, an atmosphere of panic spread throughout the great Lain temple. Duo Bao Rulai's complexion, which was originally rosy and peaceful, had turned deathly pale. Terrifying, too terrifying. He didn't even see how the ancient Buddha Dipankara was defeated. He only saw Yi Xian slap out a palm that covered the sky. As a quasi-sage, the ancient Buddha Dipankara actually fell into such a state. Sage to be. Dipankara was a real sage to be. Although he had just become a sage to be, he had surpassed the category of immortals. How could he be defeated so miserably? Bodhisattvas and Buddhas in all directions, and even Duo Bao Rulai knew that Yi Xian was very strong. Otherwise, the two sages of the West would not let him guard the great Lain temple of Spirited Mountain. However, Duo Bao Rulai and the others did not expect Yi Xian to be so strong, so terrifyingly strong. He could suppress a sage to be without any power to fight back. Who in the Western sect could have such a cultivation? If Yi Xian had not shown the aura of a sage, Duo Bao Rulai and the others would have thought that Yi Xian was a sage. Otherwise, how could his cultivation be so terrifying? Evil creature, your demonic roots are deep, and you don't have Buddha in your heart. You should enter Jiuyou Tower and repent for 100,000 years. Only then can the demonic nature in your heart be removed. Yi Xian leaped into the air on the Buddha's golden lotus until he stood in front of Dipankara, who was still twitching on the ground like a maggot. Apparently, he had not recovered from the blow he received from Yi Xian. Who was Yi Xian? Yi Xian was a terrifying figure who had passed the first tribulation of the heavenly law. A wisp of saint power was already growing in his body. No one in the realm of sage to be could be his opponent. Suppressing Dipankara Buddha who had just become a sage to be was a piece of cake for Yi Xian. Qing Ming. Buddha. Randang knows his mistake. Don't lock him in Jiuyou Tower. Half of Dipankara Buddha's body had exploded, and he was now seriously injured and on the verge of death. He did not dare to show the slightest arrogance on his face as he begged Yi Xian bitterly in a pool of blood. Buddha, please be wise. Jiuyou Tower is where the ferocious demons of heaven and earth are suppressed. Although Dipankara was in the wrong first, on account of his many years of service to the Buddhists of Mount Numinous, please punish him lightly. Duo Bao Rulai's face was pale, but he still forced a smile on his face as he pleaded with Yi Xian. After all, Dipankara Buddha had a very high status in Mount Numinous. If he was really locked in Jiuyou Tower, the Buddhas of Mount Numinous would be bitterly disappointed. And there was a saying that was very good. Without the lips, the teeth would feel cold. At this moment, Yi Xian's great power made Duo Bao Rulai tremble with fear. He knew that Mount Numinous would be led by Qing Ming Buddha from now on, and his and Dipankara's glory would no longer exist. Amitabha. Yi Xian chanted Buddha's name in a low voice, and a compassionate expression appeared on his face as he said, "My Buddhist sect is a pure place. We will not allow evil spirits to stay here. Dipankara has evil thoughts in his heart. If we don't convert his evil thoughts in time, wouldn't it be a disgrace to my Western Buddhist sect? Men, throw Dipankara Buddha into Jiuyou Tower. Only release him after 100,000 years have passed," Yi Xian said in a deep voice, not giving any face at all. This. Duo Bao Rulai's expression was hesitant. He was about to continue persuading Yi Xian, but when he saw Yi Xian's angry Vajra statue, he swallowed the words in his mouth. Men, throw Dipankara into Joyo Tower, Duo Bao Rulai ordered sternly. He also got the 2 golden arhats to come over quickly. They directly lifted Dipankara Buddha and walked out of the great thunderclap temple, clearly wanting to throw him into Joyo Tower. Buddha Qingming's Buddhist teachings are profound. We are ashamed of our inferiority. We should listen to Buddha's proverbs every day. Only then can we improve our Buddhist nature, Duo Bao Rulai said with compassion. He clasped his hands together and bowed towards Yi Xian. The other bodhisattvas and Buddhas were the same. Everyone had a peaceful and benevolent expression on their faces. However, if one were to look carefully, they would discover that there was fear growing in their eyes. The dignified ancient Buddha Dipankara was suppressed in Joyo Tower. Even if he could be released after 100,000 years, could Dipankara come out alive? What kind of place was Joyo Tower? It was a forbidden area of Mount Numinous, and it was also the place where the evil spirits of heaven and earth were imprisoned. From the beginning of the primordial age to the present, countless evil spirits from ancient times had been suppressed in Joyo Tower. In order to show that the Western sect's Buddhist teachings were boundless, the 2 sages of the Western sect walked the primordial age in the primordial age. All the evil spirits were suppressed and locked in Joyo Tower. Until Kundi became a saint, the successive generations of Buddhas of Mount Numinous followed the ideals of the 2 sages of the Western sect and continued this tradition. All the evil spirits of heaven and earth were thrown into Joyo Tower and were never allowed to take half a step out of Joyo Tower. Of course, to be called evil spirits of heaven and earth, these people were extremely terrifying. The mere bodhisattvas and Buddhas of Mount Numinous naturally couldn't really suppress them. However, Joyo Tower was built by the 2 sages of the Western sect and had the power of a saint. These evil spirits of heaven and earth naturally couldn't escape. Now that Dipankara had been thrown into Joyo Tower, how could the evil spirits of heaven and earth in the tower let Dipankara off? Even if Dipankara did not die in the end, after 100,000 years, Dipankara would be like a lamp that had run out of oil. No one knew what would happen to him. To put it bluntly, Yi Xian had thrown Dipankara into Joyo Tower. This also meant that he had sentenced Dipankara to death. From then on, there would be no more people like Dipankara in the world. Listening to the Buddha's preaching and chanting filled the sky. Yi Xian was very generous, and he was extremely generous. He oversaw the great thunderclap temple of Mount Numinous and directly explained the various Buddhist teachings in the 10,000 Buddha scripture. There were also many great Buddhist mystical abilities that were bestowed to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of Mount Numinous. As the saying went, a carrot after a stick. This was the method that a superior should use. Although a superior's suppression would make people feel fearful, they would also harbor resentment in their hearts. Only a combination of kindness and authority was the way of a superior. The 10,000 Buddha scripture was written by the 2 sages of the Western sect. Not only did it contain the 2 sages of the Western sect's understanding of Buddhism, but it also contained many great mystical abilities of Buddhism that were unknown to others. Chapter 801. When Yi Xian generously and selflessly passed on these Buddhist magic skills to the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas of Holy Mountain of the West, they were so grateful that they shed tears and were in awe of Yi Xian. When they learned that the Buddhist magic skills taught by Yi Xian were created by the 2 sages of the West, Duo Bao Rulai and the others were even more in awe of Yi Xian's identity. The Western religious sect was founded by the 2 sages of the West. Throughout the untainted land, no one had ever been so favored by the 2 sages of the West. Not only did the 2 sages of the West pass on the 10,000 Buddha scriptures to Yi Xian, but they also made him the first Buddha of Holy Mountain. From this, it could be seen that the relationship between Yi Xian and the 2 sages of the West was not simple. Duo Bao Rulai and the others naturally did not dare to have any disloyalty. Yi Xian only took 1 day to conquer Holy Mountain and make all the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas submit to him. This was both expected and unexpected. However, for Yi Xian, this was only the first step of his coming to Holy Mountain. Golden lotuses fell from the sky and sweet springs gushed from the ground. Golden lotuses bloomed all over Holy Mountain. Grass and trees grew rapidly, and the spiritual qi of heaven and earth rippled leisurely. The sound of the morning bell and evening drum echoed in Holy Mountain. It was like a country of Buddhas, giving people a sense of solemnity. In the great Leiyin temple, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the golden lotus and preached. All the bodhisattvas and Buddhas were listening attentively. Everyone's face was solemn. Because Yi Xian's Buddhist doctrine was unfathomable, they could always comprehend the true essence of Buddhism from Yi Xian's words. It could be said that they benefited a lot. However, what these bodhisattvas and Buddhas did not know was that Qing Ming, the Buddha in their eyes, was actually a peerless demon. If they knew Yi Xian's true identity and thought of the profound Buddhist ideas that Yi Xian preached today, everyone present would have a complicated mood. Amitabha, we pay our respects to Buddha Qing Ming. Suddenly, 4 deep and compassionate voices came from all directions. 4 rays of Buddha's light rose from Spirited Mountain and appeared in the Tempest Temple in an instant. The Buddhist light dissipated and the atmosphere was peaceful. 4 monks in golden kasayas stood in the great Thunderclap Temple. They put their palms together and bowed to Yi Xian with a peaceful smile on their faces. The 4 great Buddhas of Mount Numinous. The Mahavairocana, the Akalanatha, the Ratnasambhava, and the Amagasambhava were the 4 great Buddhas. They had lived for a very long time and were the true pillars of the Western sect. Greetings, Buddhas. When the 4 great Buddhas arrived, Duobao Rilai's expression changed drastically. He quickly got up and bowed to the 4 great Buddhas. Many bodhisattvas and Buddhas of the great Thunderclap Temple also got up and bowed to the 4 great Buddhas. It was no wonder that the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain behaved like this. It was only because the 4 great Buddhas had never come out to the world and had always been cultivating in the depths of Spirited Mountain. Unless Spirited Mountain encountered a disaster, the 4 great Buddhas would never come out to the world. But today, the 4 great Buddhas came together to pay their respects to Yi Xian. How could this not make the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain extremely surprised? In fact, the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain did not know that the 4 great Buddhas had already known when Yi Xian entered Spirited Mountain. After all, the 2 sages of the West had sent Yi Xian to Spirited Mountain. How could they not take the 2 sages of the West seriously? And the most important thing was that Yi Xian had suppressed ancient Buddha Dipankara the moment he entered Spirited Mountain. He had even witnessed the miserable end of ancient Buddha Dipankara with his own eyes. This also made them uneasy. They did not dare to be pretentious anymore. Naturally, they had to lower their posture and pay their respects to Yi Xian. Sit. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the Buddha's golden lotus and did not move. The expression on his face was neither sad nor happy, but it was full of Buddha nature. It was as if the arrival of the 4 great Buddhas would not move him at all. Looking at Yi Xian's indifferent posture, the 4 great Buddhas were stunned. Then, they looked at each other and saw each other's bitter smile. They did not show the slightest dissatisfaction and sat down cross-legged one after another. As the saying goes, kill the chicken to warn the monkey. This was the ancient truth. Yi Xian had suppressed ancient Buddha Dipankara. This not only gave the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain a great deterrent, but also gave the 4 great Buddhas a show of strength. How could they dare to act rashly in front of Yi Xian? There is no Bodhi tree, nor is there a bright mirror. Originally, there was nothing, so where did the dust come from? Seeing through the air. Looking at the flowers in the fog. 3,000 eternal sands. Flowing water like eternal brightness, the heavens were chanting sutras and the sound of Buddhas. Yi Xian continued to preach. The 4 great Buddhas nodded slowly and listened even more seriously to Yi Xian's preaching. The rest of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas were even more immersed in it. For a moment, the great Thunderclap Temple of Spirited Mountain was immersed in the vast Buddhist doctrine. Time flew by and the years went by in a hurry. After a full 10 years, Yi Xian's preaching finally ended. The Buddha's light that filled the sky gradually dissipated. The four great Buddhas stood up first and put their palms together to bow to Yi Xian. Qingming Buddha's Buddhist doctrine is profound. The four of us are ashamed of our inferiority. Under the leadership of Qingming Buddha, our Western sect will definitely prosper. The four great Buddhas chanted Buddha's name and expressed their most sincere respect to Yi Xian. If the four great Buddhas were only afraid of Yi Xian's cultivation base before, they were now sincerely admiring Yi Xian. This was because Yi Xian's understanding of Buddhist doctrine was much higher than theirs. They were also greatly inspired by the Buddhist doctrine that Yi Xian imparted. Even their own cultivation base had a slight improvement. Qingming has followed the teachings of my two senior brothers. I intend to let the light of Buddha illuminate the three realms, and all those who violate the teachings of Buddhism are considered evil. Qingming will definitely sweep away all evil and evil, returning peace and prosperity to the world. Yi Xian put his palms together and spoke with a rumbling voice. A Buddha's light rose behind him and illuminated him to be boundlessly majestic. It was as if he was the only one in this world. Hiss. After hearing Yi Xian's words and seeing Yi Xian's current attitude, the four great Buddhas couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Their eyes were even more solemn. As the saying goes, one can see the whole leopard from a single spot. Even though Buddha Qingming's Buddhist skills were profound and unfathomable, and he even displayed an unprecedented Buddha nature, he was way too stubborn towards Buddhism. To think that he would think that other than his Buddhist lineage, the rest of the world were all evil and unorthodox. This sort of mindset would most likely bring about a huge hidden danger to Spirit Mountain. Although the four great Buddhas cultivated the heart of Vajra glazed glass and were extremely indifferent to everything, this didn't mean that they were emotionless and desireless machines. Naturally, they could see that Yi Xian's temperament was too paranoid. They didn't know whether this was a good or bad thing for the Western sect. However, at this moment, Yi Xian was the first Buddha of Spirited Mountain. Naturally, the four great Buddhas didn't dare to question him. They could only acquiesce to Yi Xian's words. However, they were a little worried. If Buddha Qingming was really so paranoid, they didn't know what would happen in the future. The Buddhas of Spirited Mountain naturally didn't dare to have the slightest doubt. At this moment, they all bowed to Yi Xian to express their highest respect for Buddhist doctrine. Buddhist doctrine is boundless and can save all living beings. Today's teaching is over. You can disperse on your own. Yi Xian put his palms together and also asked the four great Buddhas to get up and leave. The Buddhas of Spirited Mountain also left one after another and returned to their own Taoist temples. Only Yi Xian was left sitting in the Great Layin Temple alone. There was no sadness or joy on his face. No one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 802. The Great Thunderclap Temple did not have a dome to cover it. Looking up, one could see the stars in the sky, and the surroundings were silent. Yi Xian wore a moon-white monk's robe as he sat cross-legged on the Buddha's golden lotus. He twirled a string of Buddha beads in his hand as he chanted the Vajra Sutra in a low voice. His peaceful and heavy chanting also slightly reverberated within the Great Thunderclap Temple. However, if someone were to stand in front of Yi Xian, they would be horrified to realize that Yi Xian's current expression was sinister. There was no sign of the peaceful and compassionate Buddhism at all. Joyo Tower. Suddenly, Yi Xian's chanting stopped abruptly. He blurted out these three words, and a strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Joyo Tower was not famous in the three realms. Very few people knew that Joyo Tower was a forbidden area in the Spirit Mountain, and it imprisoned many ferocious demons in the world. However, Yi Xian knew very well that the ferocious demons suppressed in Joyo Tower were all extraordinary beings. The one with the lowest cultivation level was Daluo Jingxian, and there were many sage-to-be figures among them. In the early years of the Eldritch Age, the two sages of the West subdued demons. How could the ferocious demons that they personally took action be ordinary people? There were a few forbidden areas in the world. Joyo Tower was one of them, and so was the 18 levels of hell. However, people only knew how terrifying the 18 levels of hell were, but they did not know that the ferocious demons in Joyo Tower were also extremely terrifying. Ferocious demons of the world. Interesting, very interesting. I wonder how capable these ferocious demons of the Eldritch Age are compared to me, a ferocious demon of the present world. Yi Xian stood up from the Buddha's golden lotus and walked out of the great thunderclap temple against the starry sky. A ring of Buddha's light rose behind him, and his face became merciful and peaceful again. Joyo Tower was located in the deepest part of the Spirit Mountain. It was surrounded by a barren stone forest, and there was not a single bit of vegetation growing there. The pitch-black tower towered into the clouds and was hidden in the clouds, giving people the feeling that they were looking at flowers in the fog. Yi Xian stood below the Joyo Tower and smiled as he looked at the entire Joyo Tower. Buddhist suppressions were engraved on the tower's body, as if they were golden chains. A stone door that was as black as ink. 2 arhats stood on both sides of the door. It was obvious that this was the door to the Joyo Tower. When the 2 arhats saw Yi Xian appear here, they nervously bowed towards him. Buddha. Yes. Yi Xian nodded. From the beginning to the end, a peaceful smile hung on his face, giving off a harmless feeling. Reporting to Buddha, Randang has already been sent into Joyo Tower. He definitely won't be able to escape. Buddha, don't worry, one of the arhats said with a flattering smile. Open Joyo Tower. Yi Xian took a deep look at the dark door. His voice was still calm and steady, giving people a feeling of a spring breeze. Open. Open Joyo Tower. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the 2 arhats were stunned. Then, their expressions changed drastically. Buddha, you can't do that. Joyo Tower has imprisoned all the ferocious demons of the world for generations. You are the #1 Buddha of Spirit Mountain. How can you be tainted by the filthy aura of these ferocious demons? Open it. Yi Xian frowned, and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. This also made the 2 arhats' expressions change slightly. They looked at each other and could only do as Yi Xian said. After all, Yi Xian was the true ruler of Spirit Mountain. Buzz. 2 demons subduing golden seals were sent out by the 2 arhats. They instantly merged into the dark door, causing Joyo Tower to undergo a miraculous change. Rumble. Joyo Tower seemed to be shaking. The Buddhist proverbs engraved on the tower seemed to be illusory. Following a loud rumble, the dark door slowly opened. Roar. Suddenly, the heavens and earth shook, and the void shook. Black wind rolled around the open Joyo Tower, and a thick smell of blood spewed out. It was like an abyss of hell that chose people to devour. The terrifying ferocious demon's roar made one's soul tremble. The 2 arhats were drenched in cold sweat, and they kept retreating in fear. Buddha. The 2 arhats cried out in a trembling voice. They wanted to quickly close the door. Clearly, the ferocious demons of heaven and earth in Joyo Tower were too terrifying. Opening the door for even a second longer would cause great danger. If a ferocious demon of heaven and earth really escaped from Joyo Tower, the entire Spirit Mountain would suffer an unimaginable calamity. Great. Yi Xian smiled slightly, but there was a hint of ferocity on his face. There was also a hint of excitement in his eyes. Under the shocked gazes of the 2 arhats, Yi Xian actually strode into Joyo Tower. Buddha, you can't enter Joyo Tower. The 2 arhats shouted anxiously. They never thought that Yi Xian would actually risk his life to enter Joyo Tower. It was no wonder that the 2 arhats were so worried. Joyo Tower was where the ferocious demons of heaven and earth were suppressed. These demons were extremely terrifying. Moreover, it wasn't just these demons. Joyo Tower also had heavenly lightning and earthly fire. Even a sage-to-be would suffer a great calamity if they entered. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't seem to hear the two arhats' dissuasion. He entered Joyo Tower under the shocked gazes of the two arhats. As the dark door closed with a rumble, Yi Xian disappeared from their eyes just like that. Oh no, oh no. Buddha Qingming actually entered Joyo Tower. Let's quickly report this to the other Buddhas. The two arhats looked at each other and saw the solemn look in each other's eyes. They didn't dare to delay any longer. They immediately transformed into two streaks of light and left. It was obvious that they were going to report the matter of Yi Xian entering Joyo Tower to the various Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Joyo Tower was where the ferocious demons of heaven and earth were suppressed. Even if the various Buddhas of Spirit Mountain captured some demons and threw them into Joyo Tower, they would only act in the outside world. They would never dare to enter Joyo Tower themselves. This was because anyone who entered Joyo Tower had never come out. At this moment, Yi Xian risked his life to enter Joyo Tower. This was simply an act of seeking death. If anything really happened to him, the various Buddhas of the West would definitely bear a huge responsibility. How would they explain it to the two sages of the West? Joyo Tower. Woo woo woo. A foul wind rolled in the air. The bone-melting astral wind whistled in Joyo Tower. It was impossible to see the end of the dark space. A straight and wide path extended upwards. From time to time, one could see piles of white bones lying on the ground. Roar! Numerous terrifying ghostly figures suddenly appeared above Yi Xian's head. Their bloody eyes were abnormally terrifying in the darkness. Eerie laughter came from their mouths as they pounced and bit at Yi Xian crazily. Demons and monsters, you're courting death. Yi Xian laughed coldly. The Buddha's light of the great sun suddenly exploded, instantly turning these ghosts into wisps of white smoke. Miserable screams could be heard from the area. Amitabha. Yi Xian's grayish-white hair fell behind his head. He was wearing a white monk robe as he strolled forward. The Buddha's light around him was dazzling like a golden sun, illuminating the dark space around him. Ah! Wisps of black smoke exploded with a bang. The ghosts hiding in the darkness screamed miserably. It was obvious that the Buddha's light of the great sun on Yi Xian was their nemesis. Even the slightest touch would bring them great calamity. Chapter 803. The ghosts howled in agony as the Yin wind dissipated. Yi Xian strolled forward, following the staircase to the second floor of Joyo Tower. Joyo Tower had 9 floors in total, imprisoning many ferocious demons of heaven and earth, as well as some demons and ghosts. Ferocious demons of heaven and earth was just a general term. There were immortals and demons among them. Every one of them was considered a scourge of an era. Kid, you're covered in Buddhist light. Did you make a huge mistake in Spirit Mountain? Is that why you're imprisoned in Joyo Tower? Yi Xian had just stepped onto the second floor and a black crow flapped its wings and flew toward Yi Xian. The crow was completely black, and its eyes were green and cold. As soon as it got close to Yi Xian, an extremely cold qi filled the space. A variant of heaven and earth, the 9 moons jackdaw. Yi Xian looked at the black crow, and a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. One had to know that there were too many strange beasts in the Great Desolate Era. However, in this world, these strange beasts were either dead or had disappeared without a trace. The 9 moons jackdaw was an extremely rare strange beast, and it even had an extremely terrifying great ability. Yi Xian hadn't expected to see a 9 moons jackdaw in Joyo Tower. The 9 moons jackdaw's cold qi was so dense, and its cultivation was already at the peak of the zenith heaven realm. If it were in the 3 realms, it would definitely be a revered figure. Hee, at least you're knowledgeable. Why don't you greet your grandpa jackdaw? The 9 moons jackdaw sneered arrogantly. It sized up Yi Xian with an extremely playful look, like a cat toying with a mouse. Little bird, you're quite interesting. How dare you be so impudent to me? Yi Xian wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled. While the 9 Moons jackdaw was still in a daze, he reached out his hand. This caused the 9 Moons jackdaw to come to its senses, and an extremely terrifying and fierce qi erupted. What an arrogant little baldy! How dare you play with me? Roar! The 9 Moons jackdaw was a variant of the heavens and the earth, and its innate ability was the 9 Yin frost water. This ability was extremely terrifying, and even Daluo Jingxian didn't dare to touch it in the slightest. Otherwise, his body would definitely be transformed into ice shards and his soul would be destroyed. The 9 Moons jackdaw was truly enraged now. It spat out a mouthful of 9 Yin frost water, and the terrifying coldness instantly froze Yi Xian into an ice sculpture. His entire body was frozen to the spot. Little monk, why don't you take a look at what kind of place Joyo Tower is? Once you enter this place, all of you will never be able to reincarnate. The 9 Nether jackdaw sneered and turned into a girl in black. She skipped around Yi Xian as if she was admiring a beautiful work of art. Crack! Suddenly, a strange sound rang out. September jackdaw's expression froze, and her eyes widened. She retreated a dozen steps because what happened next caused her to tremble to the extreme. Bang! Bang! There was an explosion in the air, and the Buddhist light was awe-inspiring. The ice sculpture Yi Xian had turned into shattered, and his original body was revealed. He was looking at the 9 Moons jackdaw indifferently. The 9 Yin frost water is only a so-so. Yi Xian whispered as he slowly walked towards the 9 Moons jackdaw. It was also at this moment that the 9 Moons jackdaw let out a shrill cry and turned into a ray of black light that was about to flee towards the upper levels of Joyo Tower. Terrifying, too terrifying. This little monk actually ignored the 9 Yin frost water and directly broke out of the ice. This caused the 9 Moons jackdaw's soul to leave her body. One had to know that her 9 Yin frost water could freeze everything, and all living things would suffer a destructive blow. Even the quasi-saint monk who'd come in earlier had been frozen into an ice sculpture. Although this was caused by the fact that he was seriously injured and on the verge of death, it also proved how terrifying the 9 Yin frost water was. Even a quasi-saint body couldn't withstand it. Come. In the void of 10,000 Buddhas, Buddha country in a palm, eternal sand flowed and disappeared. Yi Xian reached out with his palm and directly used the Buddha country in a palm that he'd just cultivated. Instantly, the space around them was destroyed. The 9 Moons jackdaw felt like she was sinking into a quagmire, and many illusions of the Buddha country appeared in her eyes. Rumble. The 10,000 Dharma Buddhist kingdom, a dream of Bodhi, and the Buddhist kingdom in the palm were the divine abilities of the 2 saints of the West. Although Yi Xian wasn't a saint, when he used this kind of saint technique, even a quasi-saint wouldn't be able to escape, let alone a mere 9 Moons jackdaw. Ah! An ear-piercing scream came from the mouth of the 9 Moons jackdaw. She once again transformed into her original form, but at this moment, she was tightly held in Yi Xian's hand. Her flapping wings were extremely flustered, and her eyes were filled with extreme fear. Father, save me! The 9 Moons jackdaw screamed for help. Her trembling, choked voice echoed throughout the Joyo Tower. At that moment, Joyo Tower suddenly shook, and an unimaginable cold light of heaven and earth pressed down on Yi Xian. Little monk, let go of my daughter. The world was cold, and the laws froze. The voice was ancient and cold, and filled with an eternal chill. The power of the laws in the air was suppressed, and an extremely violent ice law turned into a prison that trapped Yi Xian. I beat up the young one, and now an old one comes. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. With his cultivation, he could sense that the person who attacked him was a quasi-saint. Based on the feeling of his aura, it was the same as the 9 Moons jackdaw in his hand. The two must be closely related. Let go of me, or my father will definitely kill you. The 9 Moons jackdaw shouted coldly. Cold light flashed around her, and she transformed into the black-clothed girl again. She struggled in Yi Xian's hand, and an extremely terrifying cold light spread out, trying to freeze Yi Xian and escape from his grasp. Noisy. Rumble. Yi Xian frowned. He was not a person who would go easy on girls. He raised his hand and slapped the black-clothed girl's cheek. Slap. A loud slap sounded out, accompanied by an ear-piercing scream. A five-fingered red mark clearly appeared on the black-clothed girl's fair face, and her delicate neck was grabbed by Yi Xian. At this moment, she was completely dumbfounded on the spot. You dare to hit me, you dare to hit me? Not even my parents have ever hit me. I'm going to kill you. 3 breaths of time passed, and the black-clothed girl's icy face turned red. She completely forgot that her life was still in Yi Xian's hands. She transformed into an irascible girl, waving her hands in an attempt to attack Yi Xian. Slap. Yi Xian frowned as he slapped the other side of the black-clothed girl's face. The loud slap was exceptionally ear-piercing, causing the black-clothed girl to cover her cheeks in a daze on the spot. If you dare to make any more noise, this monk will make sure you die without a grave. Do you understand? Yi Xian smiled, and his fingers slowly tightened. The girl's face immediately turned purple, and fear appeared in her eyes once more. Her beautiful eyes became misty, and she struggled in pain in midair. How dare you? You're courting death. With a heaven-shaking roar and extreme fury, a cold figure arrived with a loud bang. The cold light of heaven and earth transformed into a torrent of laws that directly shot towards Yi Xian. From the looks of it, it was as if he had a blood feud with Yi Xian. Chapter 804. Trying to show off in front of an expert. Yi Xian's sword finger was like the sky as it pointed towards the person. The stream of laws shattered inch by inch, and the 5-fingered giant hand crushed the void, freezing the world and the person in place. Father! A piercing scream came from the black-clothed girl. A middle-aged man in a cold robe was half-kneeling on the ground, looking at Yi Xian in shock. One strike. With just one strike, the cold-clothed man's great technique was broken, and he was seriously injured. He could not believe it, but the extreme pain from the collapsed ribs in his chest proved that he had suffered a terrible blow. Who are you? The cold-clothed man slowly stood up and looked at Yi Xian with a heavy expression. Fear clearly flashed through his eyes because he was a quasi-saint, yet he was injured by a single strike from his opponent. The cultivation of this person was simply terrifying to the extreme. My Dharma name is Qing Ming. Yi Xian smiled peacefully, but he still held the black-clothed girl's neck, giving off a harmless vibe. I am Fang Han. Greetings, fellow Taoist. You have a profound cultivation, and you are at the peak of the sage-to-be. Please let my daughter go, and we can discuss anything. The cold-clothed man cupped his hands and forced a smile. Fang Han, the first 9 moons jackdaw at the beginning of the world, was born as Daluo Jingxian. He had done many evil things during the primeval age, and was suppressed by Zhuanti with the Tree of 7 Wonders. He had been locked in Jiuyou Tower for countless years. Although he was not famous in the 3 realms, his cultivation was extraordinary. Unfortunately, although Fang Han was very strong, he had met Yi Xian. After one strike, Fang Han had determined that he was not a match for Yi Xian. He had even lowered his posture, wanting to stall Yi Xian first. Who is in charge of Jiuyou Tower? Yi Xian casually tossed the girl in black to Fang Han, who quickly caught his daughter in his arms. Then, he quickly shielded the girl in black behind him. He looked at Yi Xian in surprise. Fang Han thought that Yi Xian would use his daughter as a hostage, but he did not expect that Yi Xian would not even bother to do so. Instead, he let his daughter go. This person was not simple. Fang Han's expression was extremely solemn, and the vigilance in his eyes intensified. This was Jiuyou Tower, and the other party had just entered this place. If he dared to act like this, he must be extremely capable. Otherwise, why would he dare to act like this? Have you heard of Skyless Buddha? Fang Han said in a low voice, looking straight at Yi Xian. Obviously, he was observing Yi Xian's reaction. Skyless Buddha. Yi Xian was slightly startled because he had never heard of this name. A friend has come from afar. Please come into the tower for a chat. Suddenly, a hoarse voice came from the depths of Joyo Tower. It was accompanied by the faint roar of a demon. This made Fang Han and his daughter slightly startled. They did not expect Skyless Buddha to speak in person. This is interesting. Yi Xian smiled slightly, and a strange look flashed across his eyes. Friend, please. Fang Han immediately came back to his senses and gestured to Yi Xian. Then, he pulled the girl in black and led the way forward. Obviously, he was leading the way for Yi Xian. Yi Xian strolled behind Fang Han as if he was strolling in a courtyard, like the spring wind and rain. The Buddhist light around him was still peaceful, without the slightest hint of nervousness. Joyo Tower had 9 floors. Each floor was extremely wide and had its own space. From time to time, he could see mysterious Buddhist scriptures engraved on the walls and under his feet. He did not know what they were for. Along the way, Yi Xian did not see a single living creature on each floor of Joyo Tower. When he arrived at the 9th floor under the guidance of Fang Han and his daughter, a door made of black fog appeared in front of Yi Xian. Skyless Buddha is inside. Friend, please come in. Fang Han turned sideways slightly and glanced at Yi Xian. Then, he led the girl in black into the door made of black fog. With just one glance, Yi Xian could feel countless fierce eyes staring at him from behind the door. There was also a boundless murderous aura faintly rippling from the door. A trace of a smile appeared on the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. He took a step forward and entered the 9th floor without the slightest bit of fear. The 9th floor of Joyo Tower. The murderous aura was boundless, and the murderous aura was monstrous. The low growls of ferocious demons were constantly heard. Boundless black clouds spread throughout the 9th floor. Countless pairs of fierce eyes stared at Yi Xian. There was also a green ghost fire floating in the void, giving off a strange and eerie feeling. If it was just this eerie and terrifying scene in front of him, it would not have surprised Yi Xian. What really surprised Yi Xian was the various ferocious demons sitting cross-legged on the 9th floor, and the young man in black leading them. Black lotuses bloomed in the void, and the murderous aura was boundless. Dark red blood pools were spread out in all directions, and black lotuses rippled in the void. On each black lotus sat a ferocious demon. Demonic Buddha. When he saw the scene in front of him, Yi Xian was slightly startled, and a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. Although the ferocious demons present were of different shapes, including demonic immortals, demon clans, and even monsters and ghosts, without exception, everyone was in the exact same position as the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain. If it were not for the boundless murderous aura of these ferocious demons, Yi Xian would have thought that he was in the great thunderclap temple of Spirited Mountain if they were covered by the Buddhist light. Moreover, Yi Xian also saw a familiar person. This person was the ancient Buddha Dipankara who was locked in Joyo Tower by Yi Xian. However, at this moment, the ancient Buddha Dipankara no longer had the kind Buddhist light from before. Instead, it was replaced by a ferocious demonic aura. He stared at Yi Xian with a gloomy face. Skyless Buddha, this person is the junior brother of the 2 sages of the West. His Buddhist name is Qing Ming, and he was the one who locked me in Joyo Tower. Dipankara put his palms together and bowed to the leading black-clothed youth. The black-clothed youth had a fair complexion and gave people a scholarly and elegant temperament. He did not show any power, but he was sitting cross-legged on a 12th grade black lotus, smiling elegantly at Yi Xian. Behind the black-clothed youth, countless ferocious demons were staring at Yi Xian covetously. The one with the lowest cultivation was Daluo Jingxian, and there were as many as 10 sage to be. When these ferocious demons of heaven and earth gathered together, they released an aura that could shatter one's soul. Qing Ming, my young friend, I have never heard of Kundi Jian having a junior brother. What is your relationship with them? Skyless asked with a smile. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not answer Skyless' question. Instead, he stared at this person with a frown. This was because Yi Xian felt an extremely pure devil qi from him. Although this person tried to hide it, Yi Xian's cultivation was too terrifying and his spiritual sense was extremely sensitive. Even if the other party tried to hide it, Yi Xian could vaguely guess his origin. Chaotic devil qi. Yi Xian murmured to himself. Then he looked up at Skyless and said, "What is your relationship with the demon ancestor Luo Ho?" Chapter 805. As Yi Xian's words fell, Wu Tian's expression changed slightly. Then, he regained his composure and smiled. You must be joking. I was born from heaven and earth. How could I be related to the demon ancestor? Ha! Yi Xian smiled and did not continue to ask. Since the other party wanted to hide his identity, there was no need for Yi Xian to pursue the matter. After all, his purpose here was not to pry into Wu Tian's secrets. Ba. Yi Xian chanted a Buddhist chant, and the Buddhist light around his body suddenly blazed. It was as resplendent as a golden sun, and the Buddhist light that shone out caused some of the weaker fiendish demons to let out terrified cries. Humph! Wu Tian snorted coldly. With a wave of his hand, he brought about boundless killing intent that instantly offset Yi Xian's light of Buddha. However, he looked at Yi Xian more seriously. My friend, since you have entered Jiuyou Tower, we are family from now on. Are you trying to show off to me by doing this? Wu Tian's voice turned cold. You're wrong. This penniless monk is not trying to intimidate you. This penniless monk is telling you a fact. From now on, all of you have to submit to me. This penniless monk will also bring all of you out of Jiuyou Tower. Yi Xian spoke indifferently. He looked at Wu Tian calmly. However, when he finished speaking, the void suddenly fell silent, and the atmosphere became extremely strange. What a joke! Suddenly, a cold laugh was heard. Dipankara Buddha stood up and pointed at Yi Xian. He growled, Qing Ming, you can deceive others, but you can't deceive me. Jiuyou Tower is the magic treasure of the two sages of the West. It has been suppressing everyone here. Unless the two sages of the West take action personally, we will never be able to leave this place. Little bald thief, you have guts. How dare you deceive us? Don't you know how to write the word death? A demon of heaven and earth spoke. Waves of ruthless aura bloomed and surrounded Yi Xian in the center. It was as if they were going to attack Yi Xian in the next moment. My friend Qing Ming, if you don't give me a reasonable explanation, I am afraid today will be the day you die, Wu Tian said coldly. Wu Tian said coldly. A black lotus blossomed above his head. Strands of strange demonic light rippled out and trapped the void in all directions. Black runes spread out in the void, interweaving into a terrifying killing matrix. Boom! The void exploded, and thunder rumbled the entire Jiuyou Tower. 10 demons. 10 demons of heaven and earth got up, and the space. It was an extremely terrifying killing intent. Wu Tian was the leader of the 10 great demons. Wu Tian was the leader, and there were other demons comparable to Daluo Jingxian surrounding Yi Xian. It seemed that Yi Xian was also in great danger. If it was in the past, Yi Xian might have felt an extremely great threat. However, after he passed through the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao, he was definitely an invincible existence amongst the quasi-sages. The formation set up by these fiendish demons wasn't able to scare him, Yi Xian. You are all really ignorant. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying thing happened. Yi Xian said coldly. The Buddhist light around him suddenly dissipated, and a sinister expression appeared on his face. The ancient killing intent suddenly exploded, and an extremely terrifying chaotic fog surrounded Yi Xian. A bunch of clowns. How dare you be so presumptuous in front of me? Boom! Yi Xian raised his palm. It was as if he was lifting the heavens and earth. The surrounding power of laws exploded, turning the void into a vacuum. As he slammed his palm out, the entire Jiuyou Tower shook violently as if it was about to collapse. Puff! 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 Blood splattered across the sky. Yi Xian's palm was too terrifying. Not only did it contain the power of his physical body, but it also contained his Dharma and Tao. It directly sent the 10 great demons flying. Blood spurted out of their mouths, and the murderous light around them shattered inch by inch. Bang! 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 A series of rumbling noises rang out as terrifying demonic light rippled out. Countless ferocious demons exploded into clouds of blood mist, and miserable howls rang out incessantly. Stomp! 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 Wu Tian believed that his cultivation was at the peak of the sage-to-be. Even the 2 demon emperors of the ancient demon court were not inferior to him. However, under Yi Xian's attack, his palm was distorted to the extreme, and he was forced to retreat continuously. This was because he could not resist Yi Xian's attack. Buzz! Space was destroyed, and it collapsed and reassembled. Although Yi Xian was not a saint, he definitely surpassed a sage-to-be. This was also the terror of his path of proving Tao through strength. He, who had passed the first tribulation of the heavenly way, was not comparable to a sage-to-be. If one had to make a conclusion about Yi Xian's cultivation, he could be called a sage-to-be. As long as he could pass the 3rd tribulation of the heavenly way, his cultivation would not be weaker than that of a saint. Buzz! Space seemed to be frozen, and the laws of heaven and earth were disappearing. Surging devilish light rippled around Yi Xian's body, and the ancient ferocious pressure caused people to be unable to breathe. As for Yi Xian, he was currently looking at these fiendish demons with a playful expression. Demons of heaven and earth? Ridiculous, extremely ridiculous. In front of Yi Xian, the so-called demons of heaven and earth were no different from ants. If these people were called demons of heaven and earth, then Yi Xian was the demon of all demons. Even the demon ancestor Luo Ho would feel inferior in front of him. Yi Xian had been cultivating for hundreds of thousands of years. Along the way, he had experienced countless disasters. Everything he had done was earth-shattering. These demons suppressed in the Jiuyou Tower paled in comparison to him. You pieces of trash. If it weren't for the fact that you still have some use, I wouldn't have the time to dawdle with you. Now, you only have 2 choices. You can either submit to me, or all of you can die here. Rumble. The ancient ferocious aura was boundless. Yi Xian was surrounded by chaotic fog, but his appearance was gradually changing. Finally, he returned to his original appearance, and he was looking at Wu Tian with a sinister expression. It's you. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying scream sounded out. Dipankara's teeth were trembling, and his footsteps were extremely unsteady. He even unconsciously retreated, but his gaze towards Yi Xian was filled with extreme fear. Yi Xian. You are Yi Xian. How? How? How is this possible? You. Weren't you suppressed in the Western Paradise by the 2 sages of the West? How? How? Dipankara's body and mind trembled. An extremely horrified scream came from his mouth, which also proved how terrified he was. It was no wonder that Dipankara was like this. Yi Xian was definitely the most terrifying person in the world. Other than the sages, who could punish him? He led the battle between the two great celestial court, turned hundreds of millions of miles of mountains and rivers into ashes, and even pierced through the sky, causing the three realms to suffer a boundless catastrophe. What was even more terrifying was that Yi Xian dared to insult and attack the sages. No one could compare with Yi Xian in this kind of fierce and boundless behavior. Who is Yi Xian? Wu Tian asked in surprise. He kept looking at Yi Xian. Dipankara's fearful appearance meant that he must be an extremely terrifying person. Otherwise, how could he make Dipankara so afraid? After all, Dipankara was a pre-saint. To make a pre-saint so afraid, the other party's background was probably unimaginable. Either submit or die. I will only give you 10 breaths of time to consider. After 10 breaths, if you still don't agree, you can all die in Jiuyou Tower, Yi Xian said coldly. Yi Xian said coldly. Since he'd chosen to reveal his identity, he had to subdue these fiendish devils. This was also related to his future plans. If these fiendish devils would rather die than submit, Yi Xian wouldn't mind killing them all. Chapter 806. Hiss. Gasps could be heard continuously. No one thought that Yi Xian was joking, because the murderous aura around Yi Xian was too terrifying. There was no trace of the Buddhist glory from before. At this moment, Yi Xian was staring at Wu Tian and the others with a gloomy face. Extremely sinister murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He didn't have time to waste on Wu Tian and the others. If these demons weren't useful to him, he wouldn't have bothered to enter Jiuyou Tower. After passing the first tribulation of the heavenly way, Yi Xian could be said to be invincible among pre-saints. However, he was alone and couldn't do everything himself. The demons in Jiuyou Tower were perfect for him to use, and this was only the first step for Yi Xian. 10 breaths of time quickly passed. Wu Tian and the others had unsettled expressions. It was obvious that they hadn't decided whether to submit to Yi Xian or not. However, when Yi Xian revealed a vicious smile, Wu Tian's hair instantly stood on end. An extremely terrifying feeling arose from the bottom of his heart. We are willing to submit, Wu Tian said solemnly. Wu Tian spoke in a heavy voice as he quickly bowed towards Yi Xian. This caused the expressions of many of the fiendish demons to greatly change as they looked at Wu Tian with disbelief in their eyes. Uncle Wu Tian, you can't do this. Even if he's a pre-saint, he's just one person. If we join forces and take him down, he'll definitely die. The 9 Moons Jackdaw, who had transformed into a girl in black, said anxiously. She couldn't understand why Wu Tian, who had such a powerful cultivation, would submit to Yi Xian. Yes, Buddha, let's kill him, another demon growled. He looked like he was going to attack Yi Xian. Shut up. Suddenly, Fang Han let out a low roar, which calmed the ferocious demons of heaven and earth. I'm Yi Xian. I'm willing to submit to you. From now on, I'll be at your beck and call. I won't dare to betray you. Fang Han hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian. Greetings, Yi Tiandi. The 10 great fiendish demons quickly returned and bowed towards Yi Xian with reverence. When this scene appeared, the numerous fiendish demons of the heavens and earth were completely silent. An extremely strange atmosphere was born. They couldn't understand. Yi Xian had only attacked once and seemed to have the upper hand. However, they had so many people. How could they not kill Yi Xian? A wise man submits to circumstances. You know your limits. The sinister look on Yi Xian's face was gone. Wu Tian and the 10 great demons were nodded in approval. And the 10 great demons. In fact, these weak demons didn't know that when Yi Xian sent Wu Tian and the 10 great pre-saints flying with one attack, it proved Yi Xian's terrifying cultivation. Pre-saints understood pre-saints. Wu Tian and the others could feel Yi Xian's horror. Yi Xian had only attacked once, but it made them feel like their lives were in his hands. A sense of inferiority and powerlessness grew in their hearts. Those who could become pre-saints were all extraordinary people. Each of them had an extraordinary intuition about death. They couldn't be wrong. If they really didn't agree to submit to Yi Xian, their souls would scatter in the next moment. People didn't want to die. Even these demons who had become pre-saints were no exception. Wu Tian had a great secret. He couldn't die here. With Wu Tian and the 10 great demons taking the lead to submit, the rest of the demons with the cultivation of Daluo Jingxian didn't dare to refute. They all knelt down and kowtowed to Yi Xian. Good. The chaotic fog dissipated and the evil spirit collapsed without a trace. Yi Xian's Buddha light rose behind him again. His face also showed a kind and benevolent smile. At this moment, except for Wu Tian and the other demons who submitted to Yi Xian, Dipankara had already collapsed to the ground. He looked at Yi Xian with despair in his eyes. Dipankara knew that Yi Xian would not let him go when Yi Xian exposed his identity. He would definitely die today. Dipankara, don't you want to introduce me to my origin? Yi Xian looked at Dipankara with a smile. He didn't kill him immediately. Instead, there was a playful look on his face. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Dipankara's expression changed. He nodded and began to introduce Yi Xian's identity to the other demons. Yi Xian, Yi Tiandi, he was. As Dipankara slowly introduced Yi Xian's identity, Wu Tian and the others listened carefully. However, as Dipankara introduced Yi Xian in more depth, Wu Tian and the others gradually became serious and shocked. After an hour, when Dipankara finished his introduction, Wu Tian and the others' breath stagnated. Obviously, they hadn't recovered from the shock. What does Yi Tiandi want us to do for you? Fang Han cupped his hands and asked Yi Xian tentatively. I will tell you what I need to tell you. You don't need to know what I don't want you to know. Do you understand? Yi Xian said indifferently. As Yi Xian's words fell, Fang Han's expression changed slightly. He smiled flatteringly and retreated. He could see that Yi Tiandi acted arbitrarily. If he wanted to test him, he would only be asking for trouble. Yi Tiandi's cultivation is unparalleled. Even Dong Huang Tai and Di Jun are no match for him. However, I have a question that I need you to answer. Wu Tian cupped his hands and said. What is it? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and looked at Wu Tian. This Jiuyou Tower was built by the 2 sages of the West specifically to imprison us. Even if we are willing to follow the Celestial Arch, I wonder how the Celestial Arch is going to bring us out of this place. Wu Tian directly asked the most important question. That's right. Jiuyou Tower was built by the sages. If you want to release us, the 2 sages of the West have to open the seal personally, a demon echoed. At that moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Yi Xian. They also wanted to see how Yi Xian would help them regain their freedom. After all, they had been imprisoned here for countless years and had long lost the hope of breaking out of the tower. Yi Xian could completely feel the complicated emotions of these fiendish demons. However, he lightly smiled and didn't say anything. Instead, his eyes rotated as he looked at the Jiuyou Tower beneath his feet. Oh no, it's time. The heavenly lightning and earthly fire are about to appear. Suddenly, before Yi Xian could reply, Wu Tian seemed to have thought of something. His face darkened instantly. Just as he finished speaking, Jiuyou Tower underwent a terrifying change. Chi chi chi. The void swayed, and the light of Buddha appeared. The originally calm Jiuyou Tower suddenly shook. Golden patterns spread in all directions in the void, interweaving into an extremely bright light of Buddha formation, filling every corner of Jiuyou Tower with a loud bang. At that moment, Wu Tian and the others suddenly sat cross-legged in the void. Extremely terrifying evil aura erupted from their bodies and instantly covered them. Chapter 807. Crack. The entire hall was filled with white lightning. Streaks of terrifying azure lightning were born out of thin air. The floor paved with black jade crystals instantly turned extremely red, and an extremely terrifying underground fire surged out of it. The heavenly thunder and earthly fire were irreversible. This was the heavenly thunder and earthly fire in Jiuyo Tower, and it was the embodiment of the origin saint power of the two Western sages. Even a sage-to-be would be greatly threatened by the heavenly thunder and earthly fire. Ah! Shrill screams were heard. The appearance of the heavenly thunder and earthly fire was too sudden. Some of the weaker ferocious demons of heaven and earth were drowned by the heavenly thunder and earthly fire before they could react. Their bodies were scorched, and their pale bones were exposed. They screamed in extreme pain. Rumble. The heavenly thunder and earthly fire surged. Countless ferocious demons rolled on the ground, and their miserable screams were heard continuously. Only a few ferocious demons of heaven and earth with powerful cultivation were able to withstand the heavenly thunder and earthly fire. They did not look well either. The heavenly thunder and earthly fire appeared once every 1,000 years. Today happened to be the 1,000-year period. Previously, Wu Tian and the others had been focused on Yi Xian and had forgotten about this matter. The appearance of the heavenly thunder and earthly fire now caught them off guard. Father, save me. The girl in black was drowned in earthly fire, and terrifying lightning kept striking her body. She screamed in despair. Damn it! Fang Han roared. He formed the frost seal of heaven and earth and struck it toward the girl in black, hoping to help her resist the heavenly thunder and earthly fire. But the thing that made him helpless was that the heavenly thunder and earthly fire contained a trace of the origin saint power of the two Western sages. It was not something that a sage-to-be like Fang Han could extinguish. Father! The heavenly thunder and earthly fire became more and more terrifying. The girl in black was already scorched. If she delayed for a few more seconds, she would definitely die tragically in the heavenly thunder and earthly fire. Thump, thump, thump. Suddenly, the sound of light footsteps could be heard. A figure was walking amidst the heavenly lightning and earthly fire. When this scene appeared in front of Fang Han's eyes, Fang Han was stunned. Then, he shouted excitedly, Yi Tiandi, please save my daughter. I, Fang Han, will never forget Heaven Emperor's kindness. From now on, I will do anything to repay Heaven Emperor. Yi Xian's Buddhist light dissipated. His entire body seemed to be bathed in heavenly thunder and earthly fire. He smiled faintly and slowly walked towards the black-clothed girl. What happened next caused the numerous demons to go into an uproar. Woo woo woo. The heavenly lightning and earthly fire that engulfed the black-clothed girl suddenly dispersed. It was as if Yi Xian's arrival had caused the heavenly lightning and earthly fire to become extremely fearful. They all rushed towards the other ominous devils, directly turning the area around Yi Xian into a safe vacuum zone. Thank you, Heavenly Emperor. The black-clothed girl's hair had been burned, and her body was extremely withered. She crawled on the ground weakly and thanked Yi Xian. Her eyes no longer had the arrogant look from before. You should thank your father. If he had not agreed to do anything for me, I would not have saved you. Yi Xian smiled faintly. However, his smile was extremely strange, causing the black-clothed girl to feel an even greater sense of fear. Heaven Emperor, save me. Yi Tiandi, save me. I don't want to die. When Yi Xian saved the black-clothed girl, the ominous devils engulfed by the heavenly lightning and earthly fire all cried out for help. However, what made them despair was that Yi Xian did not move or speak with his hands behind his back. He did not even have the slightest intention of saving them. If you can't even withstand a mere heavenly lightning and earthly fire, then you are really a bunch of trash. What use do I have for you? Yi Xian said with a smile. However, his voice was extremely cold and vicious, and there was not the slightest bit of humanity in it. Yi Xian was not a kind person. He did not enter Jiuyo Tower to save these ominous devils. What he wanted were powerful subordinates. The appearance of the heavenly lightning and earthly fire happened to be able to select the most powerful ones for him. The weak could only die in the heavenly lightning and earthly fire. Only the fittest survived. Yi Xian had always believed in this truth. Thus, he calmly watched these ominous devils resist the heavenly lightning and earthly fire. He had no intention of saving them at all. Time passed slowly. After 3 days and 3 nights, the heavenly lightning and earthly fire slowly dissipated, and Jiuyo Tower returned to its peaceful state. Huff! 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 Violent panting sounds came from everywhere. A large number of white bones were piled up on the ground. More than half of the ominous devils had died tragically in the heavenly lightning and earthly fire this time. The remaining half were panting violently. They had all suffered different degrees of injuries. Yi Xian, why didn't you save them? They have just submitted to you. Suddenly, a snake-headed quasi-saint from the imperial court, Yi Xian, roared furiously. This person was one of the 10 ominous devils. Because more than 10 of his descendants had been killed by the heavenly lightning and earthly fire, he could not control his anger and roared at Yi Xian. Not only was this quasi-saint angry, but the other quasi-saint ominous devils also looked at Yi Xian unkindly. Even Wu Tian's face was extremely gloomy. He looked at Yi Xian with dissatisfaction. Obviously, Yi Xian had the ability to save these ominous devils, but he just sat there and did nothing. How could Wu Tian and the others not be extremely dissatisfied? Are you lecturing me? Yi Xian looked up at the snake-headed quasi-saint and a cruel smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Oh no, retreat! Suddenly, Wu Tian warned in horror. But what happened next completely stunned all the ominous devils present. Their bodies and minds trembled violently. Rumble! The universe reversed and the void shifted. Yi Xian did not move at all. He only stretched out his palm and the laws of heaven and earth instantly shattered. A giant palm of dim light fell on the snake-headed quasi-saint's head. Under his horrified gaze, Yi Xian's killing art fell on him. No! Bang! The void shattered and his body exploded. Under the extremely dazzling light, the snake-headed quasi-saint turned into a mist of blood. He was directly killed by Yi Xian. Do you have any objections now? Yi Xian looked at Wu Tian and the others with a smile. His smile was extremely gentle, but in the eyes of Wu Tian and the others, they were extremely horrified. Quasi-saint, the one who died was a quasi-saint. Yi Xian actually killed him just like that without the slightest hesitation. Such cruel and ruthless methods caused Wu Tian and the others to be extremely shocked. However, this was not the reason why Wu Tian and the others were shocked and fearful. The real reason why they were afraid of Yi Xian was that it was not that easy to kill a quasi-saint. Any quasi-saint who stepped into the quasi-saint realm would produce a true spirit. As long as the true spirit was not destroyed, the quasi-saint would not die. But what did they see? Yi Xian killed a quasi-saint with a single blow. Even his true spirit was destroyed in the void. This was simply shocking to the extreme. Chapter 808. The ferocious demons were terrified and speechless. Looking at Yi Xian's sinister and cruel smile, everyone could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Their hearts were trembling uncontrollably. It was too terrifying. Even though Wu Tian was at the pinnacle of the sage to be, he was extremely terrified. He looked at Yi Xian with trembling eyes. Sage to be understood sage to be and knew how difficult it was to kill a sage to be. Even though he was at the pinnacle of the sage to be, he did not dare to say that he could kill a sage to be as easily as slaughtering a pig or dog. It was simply wishful thinking. But today, Wu Tian's worldview was shattered. He saw with his own eyes that Yi Xian killed a sage to be as easily as slaughtering a pig or dog. Moreover, Yi Xian was not a sage to be. How could he not be terrified? Master, please calm down. Suddenly, Fang Han bowed to Yi Xian. He looked nervous because he realized that Yi Xian was an extremely ruthless person. He did not care about ferocious demons like them at all. Moreover, his cultivation was unimaginably terrifying. Following Fang Han's bow, the other ferocious demons instantly came to their senses. They all knelt and kowtowed to Yi Xian because they did not want to die. Everyone's eyes were filled with fear. Master, Jiuyou Tower was built by the two sages of the West. We have been trapped here for countless years and have no way to escape. Do you have a way to break out of the tower? Wu Tian's eyes moved. He cupped his hands and bowed to Yi Xian. Buzz! His palm pointed to the flowing clouds and the void surged. Yi Xian did not do anything. He just flicked his sleeves and Jiuyou Tower suddenly shook. Streaks of golden light intertwined all over Jiuyou Tower. This is the sacred inscription. When the golden light flickered in the void, Wu Tian's eyes suddenly froze. He exclaimed in shock and despair appeared in his eyes. What was the sacred inscription? The saint inscription was a unique technique of a saint, and it was formed by a trace of the saint's saint energy. No matter how powerful one was, no matter how high one's cultivation was, as long as one did not enter the saint realm, no one would be able to escape from the saint inscription. Saint inscriptions filled every corner of Jiuyou Tower. The golden saint light was too mysterious, and it made one feel as heavy as the heavens. It's over, it's over. Some ferocious demons screamed in despair. For a time, all sorts of discussions were heard, and everyone was filled with despair. They knew very well that with the saint inscriptions in Jiuyou Tower, they could forget about escaping. Ha! Suddenly, a disdainful sneer sounded. Yi Xian was looking at the saint runes in the air with a strange smile on his face. All Buddhas return to origin. Rumble. Yi Xian formed a seal with both of his hands. He still had a smile on his face, but the light of Buddha around him shone brightly. Mysterious Buddhist runes were shot out by him, and the void in all directions was distorted to the extreme. Phantoms of Buddhas were condensed. Withdraw. All Dharma paths were different, and heaven and earth became one. The sound of chanting came from the heavens, causing Jiuyou Tower to rumble and shake. What happened next stunned Wu Tian and the others because they saw an unbelievable scene. The heavens were chanting sutras, the Buddhas were chanting, and the saint inscriptions that filled Jiuyou Tower were gradually becoming illusory. After a few seconds, they actually collapsed in the void. The saint inscriptions disappeared. Fang Han screamed in horror. He looked at Yi Xian with a complicated look in his eyes. It was as if he couldn't believe that Yi Xian could actually destroy the saint inscriptions. They disappeared, they really disappeared. But how could you destroy the means of a saint? If the disappearance of the saint inscriptions meant that Wu Tian and the others could escape from Jiuyou Tower, then Yi Xian's ability to destroy the means of a saint was simply unbelievable to Wu Tian. Wu Tian had a great background and knew how terrifying a saint was. He had never heard of a sage-to-be being able to destroy the means of a saint. It was simply a fantasy. We're free. Are we really free? Damn the Western religious sect. When I get out, I'll definitely destroy your spiritual mountain. I'll definitely kill this bunch of baldies. The ominous demons roared, and their murderous aura soared into the sky. When these ominous demons saw the saint inscriptions disappear, they roared crazily, constantly venting their depression. Who are you? Suddenly, Wu Tian stared at Yi Xian with great fear in his eyes. He didn't believe that Yi Xian was a sage-to-be, because a sage-to-be couldn't possibly destroy the means of the two saints of the West. There was only one real reason: Yi Xian wasn't a sage-to-be, but a real saint. Who are you among the three pure ones? Wu Tian roared in horror. His voice instantly suppressed the voices of the ominous demons of heaven and earth. It also made everyone calm down from their excitement. They looked at Yi Xian with extreme nervousness in their eyes. Yi Xian had destroyed the saint inscriptions in Jiuyo Tower and destroyed the soul of a sage-to-be with one blow. Just these two things revealed the fact that Yi Xian was a saint. It was no wonder that Wu Tian was so nervous. Yi Xian's means were not something a sage-to-be should have. Therefore, Yi Xian must be one of the three pure ones. Only the three pure ones could destroy the saint inscriptions set up by the two saints of the West. The three pure ones? Yi Xian muttered to himself. Then, he looked at Wu Tian strangely and said, "You really think highly of me. Unfortunately, I'm not one of the three pure ones, nor am I a saint. It's just that you're too inexperienced. Who said that a saint's means can only be broken by another saint?" As Yi Xian's words fell, Wu Tian was stunned. The ominous demons present were silent and looked at each other. Obviously, they were greatly shocked by Yi Xian's words. Impossible, absolutely impossible. I've never heard of a sage-to-be being able to break a saint's means. This is because the level of life between the two is fundamentally different. This is absolutely impossible. Wu Tian kept shaking his head. His eyes were filled with shock and doubt. Obviously, he did not believe that Yi Xian was a sage-to-be. He must be one of the 6 great saints of heaven and earth. Looking at Wu Tian's serious face, Yi Xian smiled indifferently. He did not bother to explain to Wu Tian. Since Wu Tian thought that he was a saint, he would not refuse. In fact, Wu Tian was right. Since the creation of the world, saints were high and mighty. Although sage-to-be also had the word saint, compared to saints, there was a huge difference. However, Wu Tian did not know that Yi Xian was now between sage-to-be and saint. If Yi Xian had to be accurately judged, Yi Xian could be called a sage-to-be. This was because when Yi Xian crossed the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao, he had completely surpassed the sage-to-be realm. The so-called sage-to-be could not possibly be his opponent. It was just that there was still a big gap between him and a saint. Moreover, Wu Tian had indeed overestimated Yi Xian. Yi Xian could break the sacred runes arranged by the two saints of the West because he had already mastered the 10,000 Buddha scripture. The 10,000 Buddha scripture was the most precious treasure of the Western religious sect. It contained all the saints' great arts of the two saints of the West. The sacred runes were one of the saints' great arts of the 10,000 Buddha scripture. Naturally, Yi Xian could break the sacred runes. Chapter 809. It was also because Yi Xian had easily dissolved the sacred runes that Wu Tian firmly believed that Yi Xian was a saint. However, Yi Xian did not bother to explain it to him. "Ah! It hurts." What is this?" Suddenly, strands of blood-red light appeared in the air. Before the fiendish devils could react, they had all entered their seas of consciousness, causing them to roll on the ground in pain as they howled miserably. The divine blood thread is also known as the soul annihilation technique. If you work for me loyally, this divine blood thread will naturally not harm you at all. However, if you are disloyal, this divine blood thread will instantly destroy your soul and kill you. Yi Xian lightly smiled, as if he was talking about a very casual matter. However, when the fiendish demons heard this, their expressions couldn't help but change. Because they kept examining themselves, they finally found a blood thread wrapped around their primordial spirits and true spirits. Obviously, Yi Xian had planted the blood god silk in them. From now on, they could only be at the mercy of Yi Xian. Wu Tian greets the Celestial Emperor. Feng Han greets the Celestial Emperor. As the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. Wu Tian and Feng Han looked at each other and hurriedly knelt down towards Yi Xian. It was also their actions that caused the fiendish demons present to chime in one after another. "Celestial Emperor, I am willing to be at your beck and call. I dare not have any thoughts of betrayal." Dipankara Buddha bowed deeply to express his loyalty. Looking at the scene before him, Yi Xian smiled happily and said, "As long as you are loyal to me, I will naturally let you regain your freedom in the future." Trust? That did not exist. Yi Xian never trusted anyone. He only trusted himself. Moreover, these demons were all arrogant and fierce. Yi Xian never wanted them to be truly loyal to him. As far as Yi Xian was concerned, as long as he controlled their lives and deaths, that was enough. This was because his next plan only required these heaven and earth fiends to listen to his orders. Yi Xian didn't need the so-called loyalty. "Leave this place with me." Yi Xian suddenly turned and left. These demons also stood up and quickly followed behind him. Although they had been planted with the blood god silk by Yi Xian and could walk out of Joyo Tower, they were extremely excited because they had been trapped here for too long. Outside Joyo Tower, the four Buddhas had solemn expressions. Duo Bao Rulai was walking anxiously. He kept observing the movements of Joyo Tower, his eyes filled with anxiety. 3,000 Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Arhats, and various Buddhas. They all had an ugly expression, and their eyes were full of great worry. Joyo Tower could only be entered, but not exited. Everyone knew this fact. Anyone who entered Joyo Tower had never truly walked out. The Buddhas of Spirit Mountain did not expect that Yi Xian would dare to enter Joyo Tower alone. This was simply unimaginable. If something really happened to Yi Xian, how were they going to explain it to the two sages of the West? "Buddhas, I can only ask you to go to the Western Pure Land to invite the two sect masters. Otherwise, I'm afraid that Qingming Buddha will definitely die in Joyo Tower after a long time." Duo Bao Rulai put his palms together and bowed to the four Buddhas. His tone was slightly anxious. "This." Mahavirakana frowned, and hesitation appeared on his face. Rumble. Suddenly, just as the Buddhas of Numinous Mountain were in a state of panic, Joyo Tower rumbled and shook. The black door was slowly opening. This also made Duo Bao Rulai and the others look at Joyo Tower in shock. Roar. The demons roared, and the sky turned dark. Joyo Tower's door finally opened completely. Boundless evil aura rolled out, and extremely terrifying demons roared. "We're out. We're finally out. Kill these baldies of Spirit Mountain. Take revenge for being trapped here for so many years. Kill them." The evil aura was boundless, and demonic light rumbled. Countless demons of heaven and earth suddenly appeared outside Joyo Tower. They stared at the Buddhas of Spirit Mountain fiercely. "How dare you break out of the tower and come out?" The four Buddhas' expressions changed drastically. They chanted the chant of subduing demons, and their auras rose rapidly. The Buddhist light that filled the sky shone down, and their gazes became extremely grave as they looked at these demons of heaven and earth. "Set up the formation." Duo Bao Rulai roared in horror. He flipped his hand and threw out the Buddha's golden alms bowl, directly sealing this part of the world. The Bodhisattvas and Arhats behind him instantly set up the Buddhist light formation. They all looked at the demons of heaven and earth who had escaped with horror. "Fellow Taoists, you all committed a grave mistake in the past, and that's why you were imprisoned in Joyo Tower. Now that you've escaped, aren't you afraid that the two Western sages will punish you?" Although Duo Bao Rulai's cultivation was only at the peak of the Zenith Heaven realm, his words carried a lot of weight in Spirit Mountain. Now that the demons of heaven and earth had escaped from Joyo Tower, he braced himself to speak, but his eyes were filled with horror. It was no wonder that Duo Bao Rulai reacted this way. The ferocious demons of heaven and earth that had escaped from Joyo Tower all had extremely terrifying cultivation levels. The weakest among them was a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal, and the 10 great ferocious demons were releasing Sage-to-be auras. How could he not be terrified? If they really started fighting, Duo Bao Rulai was very sure that Spirit Mountain would be slaughtered by these demons of heaven and earth in no time. Taoist Duo Bao. Suddenly, a chuckle sounded, and Duo Bao Rulai looked toward the source of the sound. September Jackdaw. When Duo Bao Rulai saw Fang Han, his expression changed drastically. He staggered backward, and great fear appeared in his eyes. If I remember correctly, you were a disciple of the Jia sect in the primeval age, and you were fortunate enough to have Tong Tian as your master. I didn't expect that when we met again, you'd already become a disciple of Buddhism, Fang Han said with a cold laugh. You're not dead yet? Duo Bao Rulai's face was filled with horror. He clearly remembered that when he was still at the Tai realm, Fang Han was already at the Zenith Heaven realm. If he hadn't been so arrogant and caught the attention of Daoist Juandi, he wouldn't have been suppressed in Jiuyou Tower for so many years. However, Duo Bao Rulai didn't expect that not only was Fang Han not dead, but he'd also become a sage-to-be. Daoyuo Jinxian's Fang Han was extremely terrifying in the past. Now that he'd become a sage-to-be, his ferocity was probably even greater than before. How could Duo Bao Rulai not be terrified? Mahavirakana, do you recognize me? Suddenly, Wutian strolled out from behind, smiling at Mahavirakana, one of the four great Buddhas. This caused Mahavirakana's aura to become chaotic, and the benevolence and peace on his face disappeared. He became livid and solemn. Wutian. You're not dead either. Mahavirakana screamed in a trembling voice. He'd fought with Wutian for a treasure, but Wutian had taken it. This made him hate Wutian, and he'd attracted the attention of the two saints of the West, which was why he'd suppressed Wutian in Jiuyou Tower. Mahavirakana had thought that Wutian had died in Jiuyou Tower, but he hadn't expected him to still be alive after so many years. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Mahavirakana knew that Wutian would never let him go. The world was silent, and there was no sound. A strong smell of gunpowder filled the air, as if the Buddhas of Spirit Mountain and the demons of heaven and earth were about to start a war. Amitabha. Suddenly, an ancient Buddhist chant rang out in the air, breaking the silence of the place. The expressions of the ferocious demons changed slightly, and they all consciously opened up a path. A figure covered in Buddhist light strolled over at that moment. Qingming Buddha. Duo Bao Rulai and the four great Buddhas cried out in shock when they saw the person who'd appeared. The Buddhas of Spirit Mountain were even more shocked, and the Buddhist light around them was extremely chaotic. Greetings, Buddha. Something strange happened that frightened the Buddhas of Spirit Mountain even more. The demons of heaven and earth, who were originally arrogant and fierce, prostrated themselves before Yi Xian in the void, their faces full of reverence. Chapter 8:10. What's going on? Duo Bao Rulai exclaimed in surprise. The scene in front of him made him feel like he had fallen into a dream. He couldn't imagine that the ferocious demons of heaven and earth who were so arrogant just a moment ago were now bowing down to Yi Xian. Amitabha. A ring of Buddhist light rippled through the heavens and earth, illuminating Yi Xian to the point of being boundlessly imposing. As he chanted the name of Buddha, his face revealed a merciful expression. This also caused the Buddhas of Spirit Mountain to quickly wake up from their daze. Greetings, Buddha Qingming. The four Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Buddhas, and even the monks of Spirited Mountain all put their palms together and bowed to Yi Xian. However, everyone's eyes were filled with surprise. They didn't know what relationship these ferocious demons of heaven and earth had with Yi Xian. The Buddhas of Spirited Mountain were not stupid. When these ferocious demons of heaven and earth kowtowed to Yi Xian, it was obvious that there was an unusual relationship between the two. They were also waiting for Yi Xian's answer. The sea of bitterness is boundless. Repent and you'll see the shore. Lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately. Yi Xian smiled peacefully and said, Buddhism is vast and all living beings are saved. I entered Jiuyou Tower and received the heart of Buddha. Du Wutian and the others were freed from the sea of bitterness. From now on, there will be no more so-called ferocious demons of heaven and earth. They will all be devoted to Buddhism and become members of Spirited Mountain. What? No. Buddha. When Yi Xian finished speaking, there was an uproar. The Buddhas of Spirited Mountain who were present changed their expressions. Their eyes were filled with horror, and they even tried to dissuade him. It was no wonder that the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain were terrified. It was already a big deal that the ferocious demons of heaven and earth had escaped from Jilyo Tower. If they all joined Buddhism, wouldn't Spirited Mountain become a place to hide evil? Amitabha. Yi Xian chanted the name of Buddha, and an extremely terrifying Buddha's aura spread out. Instantly, the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain fell silent. They all looked at Yi Xian with a heavy expression. The Buddhist sect is vast, and we help people to do good. Since they have repented, the Buddhist sect is naturally willing to accept them. This matter is settled. All of you may leave. Yi Xian acted arbitrarily and even displayed the vast power of Buddha. His face also showed the appearance of an angry Vajra, not allowing the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain to object at all. Yes, Buddha. Duo Bao Rulai's expression changed slightly. His eyes turned slightly as he quickly bowed to Yi Xian. He then called for all the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas to return to their respective dojos. However, Duo Bao Rulai's eyes were extremely horrified. It was obvious that he had some unknown thoughts in his mind. Buddha Qing Ming's Dharma is boundless. We are ashamed of our inferiority. The four Buddhas put their palms together and bowed to Yi Xian. Then, a cloud rose under their feet and floated away. No one knew what the four Buddhas were thinking. Go. Looking at all the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain leaving, Yi Xian spoke softly and strolled towards the Tempest Temple in the void. Wu Tian and the other fierce demons quickly followed behind him and all of them disappeared into the void. Rumble. When Yi Xian and the others left, the towering Jilyo Tower collapsed with a loud bang. Its former glory no longer existed, and only debris was left on the ground, proving that Jilyo Tower had once existed in this world. Tempest Temple. The murderous aura was boundless, and the light of Buddha lingered. The two extreme auras intertwined, causing the entire Tempest Temple to become extremely strange. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the golden lotus of Buddha. The light of Buddha on his body was auspicious and heavy. All around him were the fierce demons of heaven and earth who had escaped from Jilyo Tower. Buddha, may I know why you want us to join Spirited Mountain? Wu Tian was the first to speak. His eyes were filled with doubt. One had to know that they were all vicious demons, yet Yi Xian actually allowed them to stay in the Spirit Mountain. If word of this were to spread, it would definitely attract the attention of the three realms. Furthermore, Wu Tian and the others knew that Yi Xian's identity could not be exposed. If they did so, it was very likely that they would expose Yi Xian's identity. Prosper Buddhism and destroy Tao. Suddenly, Yi Xian softly said. Just these four simple words instantly caused the surrounding fiendish demons to suck in a breath of cold air. Their gazes towards Yi Xian were filled with extreme shock. Prosper Buddhism and destroy Tao. Fang Han murmured to himself. Then, he looked at Yi Xian with trembling eyes and said, I wonder if my lord can explain what it means to prosper Buddhism and destroy Tao. Among the four major states, Tao is flourishing. Even in the Aparagodania continent, there are many Tao branches. The two sages of the West have always wanted Buddhism to flourish. Since that is the case, I will fulfill their wish. Yi Xian smiled. However, his smile was strange and sinister, giving people an extremely creepy feeling. My lord, you want to provoke a war between Buddhism and Tao? Wu Tian's expression changed greatly, and his voice trembled. The Great Witch Demon Calamity, the war between Buddhism and Tao. This is a brilliant age, but it is also a cruel world. If I don't stir up chaos in the three realms, how can I fish in troubled waters and enter the Saint Plain? Yi Xian murmured to himself. The smile on his face became even stranger. Hiss. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the ferocious demons sucked in a breath of cold air. Their gazes towards Yi Xian were filled with extreme fear. They never thought that Yi Xian would actually want to cause complete chaos in the three realms. What is the great catastrophe of heaven and earth? What is the dark turmoil? Let it all begin at Spirited Mountain. Yi Xian murmured to himself with a smile as if he was talking about something very calm. However, his eyes were sinister and strange, and contained an unknown excitement. The shocking battle between the two celestial court had indeed brought a catastrophe to the three realms. However, this was nothing to Yi Xian. Since there was going to be chaos, then let it be chaos. He wanted to be the initiator of this dark turmoil and completely ignite all the hatred and anger in the three realms. Only then could he quietly become a saint in this chaotic world. The great witch demon calamity and the war between Buddhism and Tao had always been two major hidden dangers since the untainted age. They would also involve the 6 sages of heaven and earth. Only then could he have enough time to quickly become a saint. After passing the first tribulation of the heavenly Tao, Yi Xian would be invincible among the sage-to-be. However, Yi Xian had no idea what the second tribulation of the heavenly Tao was. As the saying went, victory in chaos. If the three realms were in chaos, perhaps the second tribulation of the heavenly Tao would come quickly. Only after Yi Xian passed the 3 tribulations of the heavenly Tao would he have the ability to fight against the sages. My lord, I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it. Fang Han cupped his hands and said to Yi Xian. Say it. We have been imprisoned in Jiuyou Tower for countless years. The Buddhas of Spirited Mountain see us as enemies. Although my lord has suppressed them, I'm afraid that they will be disloyal. If the 2 sages of the West know about this, I'm afraid. Fang Han stopped speaking. However, he did not need to continue. Yi Xian understood what he meant. You're right. I have my ways. Yi Xian smiled with a strange look in his eyes. How could he not know that he had caused such a big commotion? How could the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain remain indifferent? Clang, clang, clang. Auspicious and colorful, the light of Buddha covered the sky. 81 bells were rung in Spirited Mountain. The light of Buddha shone brightly, and the Tempest Temple that stood tall even emitted endless light of Buddha. Chapter 8:11. All the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain were rushing towards the Tempest Temple. When the 81 bells were rung in Spirited Mountain, it meant that something big was about to happen. Hence, they did not dare to delay and rushed towards the Tempest Temple. In the Tempest Temple, the demons of heaven and earth sat cross-legged in the void. However, the ferocious aura on their bodies had disappeared. Instead, their bodies were blooming with auspicious light of Buddha, and they were wearing the unique robes of Buddhism. Those who did not know the identities of these demons would definitely think that they were the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain. Yi Xian wore a white robe and sat cross-legged on the golden lotus of Buddha. A light of Buddha rose behind him, and he was chanting the Diamond Sutra in his hand, whoosh, 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 whoosh. Mahavairakana was the leader of the 4 great Buddhas. When he saw the fiendish demons sitting cross-legged beside Yi Xian, their bodies were surrounded by Buddhist light. They no longer had the fiendish aura from before, and an extremely bad feeling arose in their hearts, whoosh. What? The smile on Mahavairakana's face disappeared as he let out a low roar. The Buddhist light around him was extremely turbulent, and he looked at Yi Xian with a look of horror. Not only Mahavairakana, but the 3 great Buddhas also had gloomy expressions. The rest of the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain were in an uproar, and instantly, the great Thunderclap Monastery became extremely noisy. Duobao Rulai, on the other hand, was looking down and not moving. However, no one noticed Duobao Rulai's abnormality. Noisy. Suddenly, Wutian roared, instantly suppressing the voices of the Buddhas on Spirit Mountain. An extremely terrifying might pressed on the minds of the Buddhas on Spirit Mountain, causing their voices to abruptly come to a halt. Buddha Qing Ming is the master of Spirited Mountain. How dare you question his decision? Wu Tian scolded coldly. How dare you, demon? You have just entered Spirited Mountain. Is this the place for you to speak? A Buddha retorted with a low roar. He would never allow Wu Tian to behave atrociously in the Great Thunderclap Monastery. Buddha Qing Ming is wise. The Tao lineage was founded by the three pure ones. If we wipe out all the Tao lineages in the Aparagodania continent, wouldn't we be provoking a war between Buddhism and Taoism? Even if you have the heart to promote Buddhism, this method is not advisable. Buddha, please think twice before you act, Mahavairakana said coldly. That's right. Since ancient times, Buddhism and Taoism have been one. If Spirited Mountain were to attack Tao, even the two sect leaders would never allow it, another Buddha echoed. Are you defying my will? Suddenly, the peaceful smile on Yi Xian's face disappeared, and the surrounding Buddhist light dissipated with a loud bang. Waves of terrifying chaotic fog covered him, and how could he still have the slightest bit of Buddhist peace? You've actually become a demon? Looking at the demonic aura that bloomed around Yi Xian, Mahavairakana roared in horror. His expression instantly became vigilant, and a great sense of fear grew in his heart. How dare you, Qing Ming? I've long seen that something is wrong. You dare to wallow in the mire with these demons of heaven and earth. We will definitely report today's matter to the two sect leaders, a Buddha reprimanded. Let's go. Mahavairakana chanted the name of Buddha, and a bright Buddhist light erupted. He directly called for the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain to leave the Tempest Temple. Obviously, the situation at this time was extremely dangerous, and the best solution was to leave this place and report this matter to the two sages of the West. Do you think you can leave? Rumble. The Buddhist light dissipated, and the demonic aura was boundless. Led by Wu Tian and Fang Han, the two of them led many demons of heaven and earth to surround the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain. It was also at this moment that the void of the Great Thunderclap Temple was trapped, and the surroundings were covered by the chaotic fog. An extremely terrifying aura filled every corner of the Great Thunderclap Temple, making it impossible for the Buddhas on Spirited Mountain to escape. Qing Ming, what are you trying to do? Aren't you afraid that the two sect leaders will find out about today's matter and punish you? Mahavairakana roared in a trembling voice, and his eyes were extremely heavy. He knew that if he made a mistake today, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. What am I trying to do? Yi Xian smiled, but his smile was very strange. It made the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain feel a sense of trepidation, as if Yi Xian's smile was more terrifying than death. Xuandi has a sage's method, and this method is called the Soul Expiation Buddhist Voice. This method can expiate all living things. Unfortunately, this method is not recorded in the Thousand Buddha scripture, and it's a pity that these two bald thieves don't know. When they used the Soul Expiation Buddhist Voice on me, I happened to remember this method. Today, I will use this opportunity to expiate all of you here. Yi Xian rose from the golden lotus of Buddha, and the fog around him covered the sky and the earth. An extremely demonic and terrifying aura surrounded Yi Xian, and the mysterious chanting of sutras came from the void of the heavens. Buddha becomes a demon. Suddenly, Yi Xian roared ferociously, and an extremely cruel and violent expression appeared on his face. He put his palms together like a demon monk, and his mouth was chanting an extremely mysterious and abstruse sutra. Although the Soul Expiation Buddhist Voice was a unique method of the two sages of the West, and it seemed to be a great Buddhist skill, it was actually just a method to use it. Yi Xian was extremely enthusiastic about this method, and he had made great improvements based on the general principles of the Immortal scripture. He had already changed the Soul Expiation Buddhist Voice to an extremely terrifying level. At this moment, Yi Xian was using the Soul Expiation Buddhist Voice, or rather, he was using the Soul Expiation Demonic Voice because he wanted to expiate all the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain. From then on, they would be loyal to him, and the entire Spirited Mountain would be used by him. Ah! No! What's this? The chanting of sutras in the heavens and the demonic voice poured into their ears. Yi Xian's chanting became louder and louder, and the entire Tempest Temple turned into a dark prison. Black demonic lotuses grew in the void, and they turned into a raging demonic fire that drowned all the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain. The Buddhas were howling miserably, and the Bodhisattvas were screaming. This was an expiation of demons, and it was a tragic process of Buddhas turning into demons. Not only did it change the temperament of all the Buddhas of Spirited Mountain, but it also gradually made them blindly trust and acknowledge Yi Xian. Chapter 8:12. Greetings, Gautama Buddha. All the Buddhas bowed and Spirited Mountain was peaceful. When the demonic sound of soul expiation stopped, all the Buddhas on Spirited Mountain woke up one after another. However, their faces were all filled with piety as they bowed to Yi Xian. The demonic sound of soul expiation was originally the saint technique of the two sages of the West. After some modifications by Yi Xian, it directly turned into his own secret technique and completely changed the temperament of all the Buddhas on Spirited Mountain. It had to be said that this technique was too vicious. Although it didn't kill anyone, it could change a person's mind. At this moment, the only person that all the Buddhas on Spirited Mountain were loyal to was Yi Xian. Amitabha. Yi Xian chanted the name of Buddha loudly as a bright smile bloomed on his face. At this moment, Spirited Mountain was under his control, and things would develop as he expected. Duobao. Suddenly, just as all the Buddhas on Spirited Mountain were bowing to Yi Xian also looked at Duobao Rulai. He saw that this person's eyebrows were lowered, and his knees were slightly trembling. Gautama Buddha. Duobao Rulai raised his head, but the smile on his face was uglier than crying. This was because when Yi Xian performed the demonic sound of soul expiation, this technique wasn't used on him. Moreover, at this moment, Duobao Rulai seemed to have discovered a shocking secret. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely evasive gaze, as if he was afraid of something. It seems that you have guessed my identity. Yi Xian could be considered to have dealt with Duobao Rulai for a long time. Duobao Rulai was only at the peak of the grand heavenly realm, but he was able to sit on the position of the Lord of Spirited Mountain. This also showed that he was not simple in terms of wisdom and shrewdness. At this moment, Duobao Rulai obviously noticed something. Greetings, Heavenly Emperor. I only ask that you spare my life. Suddenly, Duobao Rulai's expression changed rapidly. He directly knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Yi Xian while trembling. His face had already turned extremely pale. Dipankara. Yi Xian smiled coldly. Instantly, he understood where his identity was exposed. This also made him look at Dipankara coldly because in Spirited Mountain, only Dipankara was on good terms with Duobao Rulai. Dipankara Buddha must have told Duobao Rulai about his identity. Forgive me, Celestial Emperor. Although Duobao once had a grudge with you, he is still the master of Spirit Mountain. With him guarding Spirit Mountain, he will definitely be able to solve a lot of problems for you. I am just thinking for you. Dipankara quickly kowtowed and explained. His face showed sincerity. Duobao Rulai. As Dipankara had Duobao Rulai for many years, for Duobao Rulai had been in charge for many years. As Dipankara had said Duobao Rulai had it. Buzz. A strand of blood god thread appeared in Yi Xian's hand. He raised his hand and put it between Duobao Rulai's eyebrows. Duobao Rulai did not dare resist because he knew that if he wanted to live, he had to be controlled by Yi Xian. This was the only way he could survive. Heavenly Emperor, I have been disrespectful to you in the past. I hope you can forgive me. From now on, I will be at your beck and call. I will not dare to betray you. Duobao Rulai kowtowed humbly to show his attitude. You are not bad. Yi Xian smiled. He liked smart people, and Duobao Rulai was a smart person. Although they had been enemies for a long time, and Yi Xian had wanted to kill him, Yi Xian's cultivation had left Duo Bao Rulai far behind. Naturally, he would not treat him as an opponent. Of course, Yi Xian was not a benevolent person. He was not that broad-minded. He could kill Duo Bao Rulai if he wanted to, but killing him would not be of much use to Yi Xian. At this moment, Duo Bao Rulai belonged to him. This was the best result. On this day, the great thunderclap temple of Spirit Mountain was filled with Buddhist light. The sound of Buddha's chanting could be heard. The bell of Spirit Mountain kept ringing, echoing in the Aparagodania continent. On this day, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the great thunderclap temple of Spirit Mountain all walked out of Spirit Mountain. They roamed the Aparagodania continent with angry Vajra Dharma images. They eradicated any orthodoxy that did not respect the Western sect. Orthodoxy of Chan sect, kill. Orthodoxy of Jie sect, kill. Even the demon kings who were cultivating in seclusion deep in the mountains and the orthodoxies that the imperial court of the mortal world believed in. Those who did not respect the Buddhist orthodoxy were all reduced to heresy. The Buddhas all over the sky started a boundless massacre, constantly establishing the prestige of Buddhism in the Aparagodania continent. Such a huge commotion in Spirit Mountain of the West naturally attracted the attention of various orthodoxies. If it was in the past, it would definitely be a shocking event. However, because of the battle between the two celestial courts, the three realms of heaven, earth, and man had been in turmoil. The Buddhist sect purged the orthodoxies of the collateral orthodoxies, so naturally, it did not cause much of a stir. However, a single spark could start a prairie fire. This was only Yi Xian's first step. No one would have thought that the real catastrophe of heaven and earth had just begun. Ever since the battle between the two celestial courts that broke through the heaven and earth realms, the ancient demon court was in a state of semi-seclusion. They even gathered all their forces to recuperate. The two demon emperors even went into seclusion, and the so-called orthodoxy of heaven and earth was reduced to a joke. The battle in the past was too terrifying. It also completely established Yi Xian's glorious reputation. The two demon emperors were suppressed. Even with the support of Saint Nuwa, no orthodoxy in the three realms would submit to the ancient demon court. The ancient demon court's reputation was tarnished. The massive heavenly cycle star formation was broken. The two demon emperors were trampled under Yi Xian's feet. More than half of the ancient demons were killed. This was an extremely heavy blow to the ancient demon court. Back to the 33-layered celestial court led by Yi Xian. Ever since Yi Xian was taken away by the two sages of the West, the 33-layered celestial court vanished. The Great Celestial Protection Formation covered the 33-layered celestial court. No one knew where it was hidden in this world. All information about Yi Xian and the celestial court seemed to have disappeared from the world. No one knew what happened to Yi Xian, and no one knew where the 33-layered celestial court was. Everything about Yi Xian disappeared from the three realms. The most shocking thing was that Nuwa and Yuanshi jointly issued a saint's decree, announcing to the people of the three realms that Yi Xian was a ferocious demon of heaven and earth. Anyone related to him was an evil demon, and all of them would be wiped out from the world. Fortunately, the Jia lineage had Tong Tian. Yuanshi and Nuwa did not dare to be too presumptuous. After all, the four immortal slaying swords were not just for show. Tong Tian was also sitting cross-legged outside the 33-layered heaven. If Yuanshi and Nuwa did anything strange, he would definitely appear again. Moreover, Tong Tian had always felt that he had let Yi Xian down. He was one of the three pure ones, and he controlled the immortal slaying sword formation. Yet, he was unable to protect Yi Xian. This was a great humiliation for Tong Tian. Not only did he bear a grudge against Nuwa and Yuanshi, the two sages of the West had also become a thorn in his heart. He wished he could skin the four sages alive. Chapter 8:13. Spirit Mountain, Great Laying Temple. Yi Xian was dressed in a white monk robe. He was still disguised as Qingming Buddha because this was his current identity. Wu Tian and the others stood behind him, accompanied by Duobao Rulai and Dipankara. Master, are you really leaving? Wu Tian asked in a low voice. You're at the peak of the sage to be. With you guarding Spirit Mountain, you can easily resist as long as the saints don't come out. I'm not needed here anymore, Yi Xian said calmly. Master, your identity can't be exposed. If you appear in the three realms alone, I'm afraid. Duobao Rulai said worriedly, his eyes trembling slightly. Obviously, Yi Xian had offended the two saints. Duobao Rulai was very confused about the relationship between Yi Xian and the two saints of the West. Everything seemed to be a cloud of fog that he couldn't see or guess clearly. You must do what I tell you. You don't have to worry about anything else, Yi Xian said calmly, his eyes unfathomable. Because he had to leave. Controlling Spirit Mountain of the West was only his first step. It was only one of his methods to stir up chaos in the world. Yi Xian understood one thing very well. To forge iron, one had to be strong. The so-called methods were only temporary. He had to rely on himself to make himself stronger. Only when he was strong could he suppress the world. At that time, he wouldn't need these useless methods. He could crush all his enemies, even the saints would be trampled under his feet. Yi Xian wanted to find his second tribulation of the heavenly Tao. Only after passing the three tribulations of the heavenly Tao could he be fearless of the saints. This was what he really needed. Moreover, he was pressed for time. Although he had deceived the two saints of the West and lured out Yuan Ling, paper couldn't wrap fire. Sooner or later, his true identity would be exposed. Moreover, the two saints of the West and Yuan Ling would realize that he hadn't been converted at all. Yi Xian had to achieve supreme cultivation before he was discovered. Only then would he truly have no fear of the six great saints of the heavens and earth. He would also have a bargaining chip to compete with them, and even truly face Yuan Ling. If he stayed on Spirit Mountain, it would only waste Yi Xian's time, so he had to leave. Moreover, he had already thought of where to find the second tribulation of the heavenly axiom. Farewell, Master. Wu Tian and the others bowed to Yi Xian. Duobao Rulai and Burning Lamp did not dare be slow because their lives were in Yi Xian's hands. If Yi Xian died, none of them would live. Qi. Yi Xian stepped into the sky, and a cloud appeared under his feet, carrying him towards the east. In a flash, he disappeared from the eyes of Wu Tian and the others. In the cave of the slanting moon and 3 stars on Mount Lingtai Fangsuan. The heavens and earth were boundless, and the universe was always changing. The Mount Lingtai Fangsuan had always been the pure land of the 3 realms since the creation of the heavens and earth. It had never been disturbed by anyone. Pan Gu opened the sky, Hung Jun preached the Tao, sages appeared, and all things were born. The river of time flowed slowly according to the unchanging law. Everyone's fate was determined by the heavens. Whether it was the 6 great saints of the heavens or the living beings of the 3 realms, their fate had long been determined under the heavenly axiom, and could not be changed. There were many who shouted this slogan, "My fate is in my own hands, not the heavens." However, there were very few who could really do it. Although there were few, it did not mean that there were no such people in the 3 realms. All living beings who were not born by the heavens and earth had a glimmer of hope to not be controlled by the heavenly axiom. Landia, Zhen Yuanzi, Donghuang Tai, Di Jun, demon ancestor Luo Ho, and the extremely mysterious patriarch Subodhi. Their origins were extremely mysterious. Some were born from the primal chaos, and demon ancestor Luo Ho was one of the chaos demon gods. Naturally, they were not under the jurisdiction of the heavenly axiom. Therefore, the 3 realms was not as simple as one imagined. It was filled with too many secrets that were not known by anyone. Yi Xian was dressed in a white monk robe. He strolled among the green mountains and clear waters. With every step he took, he crossed a distance of 10,000 miles. A mountain range in front of him faintly appeared in his eyes. Buzz! The void changed as lotuses bloomed with every step. The Buddhist light that filled the sky surged in the void. Golden lotuses bloomed in all directions. All living things were recovering. Vegetation was growing. The lush vegetation was growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. So near, yet worlds apart. When Yi Xian appeared at the foot of Mount Fengsuan, he saw a scene that left him astonished. Wheat fields were as dazzling as a golden sea. Large numbers of farmers were plowing the fields, and the hoes in their hands were constantly plowing the soil. It was as though they were immersed in the joy of farming. Even though Yi Xian's entire body was emitting a peaceful Buddhist light, making him look incomparably imposing, these farmers only raised their heads to glance at him before continuing to farm the fields beneath their feet. Interesting. Yi Xian's Dharma eyes Tong Tian could tell at a glance that the farmers were mortals. However, they did not show any surprise when they saw him. Instead, they had a tranquil look in their eyes. This made Yi Xian filled with curiosity towards Mount Fengsuan. Immortal Elder, are you here to seek immortality? A middle-aged man in a sweatshirt and carrying a hoe walked towards Yi Xian. Although he was only a mortal, his body was strong, and he had a vitality that ordinary people did not have. He smiled and greeted Yi Xian. I heard that there is a patriarch Subodhi on Mount Fengsuan. His magical power is boundless, and I have long admired him. I specially came here to pay a visit. Yi Xian put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. As expected. The middle-aged farmer laughed and said, every year, there are people who find this place and want to become Patriarch Subodhi's disciple. However, he only accepts fated people. If Immortal Elder can find the cave of the slanting moon and 3 stars, you will naturally be able to meet him. As the middle-aged farmer spoke, he pointed the way up the mountain for Yi Xian. Then, he waved at Yi Xian and went back to plowing the fields. Following the direction pointed by the middle-aged farmer, Yi Xian saw a small path up the mountain. He strolled towards it. Mount Fengsuan wasn't tall. It looked like an ordinary mountain, and it didn't have the slightest bit of concealment. When Yi Xian stepped onto the mountain path, his entire body disappeared from Mount Fengsuan. Inside Mount Fengsuan, Yi Xian walked along the small path up the mountain. The surrounding vegetation grew vigorously. Time passed by slowly. After 2 hours, Yi Xian still did not see the end of the path. Suddenly, Yi Xian stopped. His eyes flashed with a strange black light. His eyes seemed to be able to see through the 3 realms of heaven, earth, and man. He felt that there was something wrong with Mount Fengsuan. According to his speed, he would be able to reach the summit in at most the time it would take to brew a cup of tea. However, after a full 2 hours, he was still walking on the mountain path. If there wasn't any mystery behind this, Yi Xian wouldn't believe it. Yi Xian abruptly turned his head around, and his eyes instantly froze. A trace of gloominess flashed through his eyes, because he actually saw that he was still at the foot of the mountain. This 2-hour journey didn't allow him to advance at all. Summer heaven and earth, 10,000 arts traceless. Yi Xian muttered to himself. A look of shock flashed across his face. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.